I had spent every dollar I had buying a 140-acre horse ranch in Montana, keeping the final promise I made to my late wife. But during the housewarming dinner, my daughter suddenly appeared and asked, "Did you put the ranch into a trust, or is it still only under your name?" 3 weeks later, my son-in-law arrived with a stack of legal papers, and his mother took me to a doctor who claimed I was no longer mentally fit to manage my own assets. They thought I was just a lonely old man slowly losing his memory. They were wrong. Take a moment with me. Before we continue, drop a quick comment and tell me what's happening outside your window. Right now, sunny, rainy, snowing, or something else. I read everyone, and they truly matter. Quick note. Some details in this story have been adjusted for storytelling and reflection. What matters most is the lesson it carries. The Montana wind carried my late wife's voice through the wooden fence as I touched the rusted gate latch, for the first time since buying the place. 18 months after burying Helen, I was finally keeping the promise. The gravel crunched under my boots as I walked the long driveway toward the barn. September fog hung thin over the 140 acres, softening the edges of the mountains beyond. This ranch had cost me everything I'd saved from 30 years as a dispute attorney, but Helen had circled the listing in red ink 3 weeks before the cancer took her. "Vernon," she'd whispered from the hospital bed, her hand barely strong enough to hold the pen, "promise me you'll buy it. Make something beautiful there." I'd promised. I always kept my promises to Helen. The barn rose ahead, weathered wood still solid after 76 years. A tarnished plaque near the door read, "Established 1948. I ran my hand along the frame, feeling decades of Montana winters in every groove, and heard hoofbeats inside. "Keys to the barn, Mr. Whitaker. The stallion's waiting." Clayton Mercer stood in the doorway, a lean 43-year-old ranch manager with sun-weathered skin and the quiet efficiency of someone who'd spent 20 years as a rodeo livestock supervisor. He held out a ring of brass keys without ceremony. "Appreciate it," I said, taking them. The metal was still warm from his palm. "Property's in good shape," Clayton said. "Previous owner kept the fence's tight water system updated last spring. Stallion's the crown jewel champion breeding stock, worth close to $450,000 on his own." I stepped into the barn. The smell hit me exactly like Helen said it would: hay and history and second chances. The stallion stood in the center stall, a massive bay with a white blaze down his face. His dark eyes tracked my movement with intelligence that made my breath catch. "He knows you're the one who saved him." Kurt Dalton, a 38-year-old equine trainer with calloused hands and the focused intensity of someone who understood horses better than people, ran his hand along the stallion's neck. "Previous owner was going to sell him for slaughter to cover debts. You buying this place kept him alive." I approached slowly, let the stallion smell my hand. His breath was warm against my palm. "I'm here, Helen, just like we planned." The stallion nickered a low sound of recognition. Kurt smiled. "He'll do right by you," Kurt said. "Long as you do right by him." I spent the afternoon walking every acre Clayton, pointing out property lines and water sources, Kurt explaining the breeding program potential. By the time the sun started dropping behind the western ridge, I felt something I hadn't felt since Helen died, like I belonged somewhere again. That evening, headlights swept across the ranch house windows. I hadn't expected visitors. The property was 30 minutes outside Livingston, another 40 from Bozeman. But the rental car pulled up to the porch, and my daughter stepped out with her phone already raised to photograph the house. Roxanne Townsend, 42 years old, with expertly highlighted hair, and the polished appearance of a marketing consultant who rarely landed steady clients, crossed the gravel in heels that had no business on a ranch. "Dad, oh my God, this place is incredible." She hugged me hard, and for a moment, I believed it was real. "Brought the family to see your new spread," she said, stepping back. Behind her, Brent Townsend emerged from the driver's seat, broad-shouldered 44, a failed resort developer with expensive sunglasses and mounting financial desperation hidden behind a salesman's smile. He walked the property line with his eyes like he was already calculating square footage. "Mr. Whitaker, this is something special," Brent said, shaking my hand too long. "Really special. Must have cost a fortune." Most of what I had, I admitted. Their 11-year-old daughter Ivy climbed out last, a quiet girl with her grandmother's serious brown eyes and the wary posture of a child caught between warring adults. She lingered near the fireplace inside, clutching her phone but not using it. Roxanne walked through the house, touching everything: the stone fireplace, the leather furniture, the oak desk, where I'd left the property documents spread out to review. "So, this is all yours now." "This is... Dad, this place is incredible. So, is it just in your name, or did you set up some kind of trust?" The question came before she asked how I was doing. When did my daughter learn to smile with her mouth, but not her eyes? "Just me," I said carefully. "Simpler that way." Of course, of course." She glanced at Brent, something unspoken passing between them. "I just meant, estate planning. You're 69 now, Dad. It's smart to think ahead." Brent moved toward the desk, casual like he was just admiring the view through the window. "Mind if I grab a photo of this sunset? The light's perfect." He raised his phone, but the angle was wrong for the window. The camera pointed down at my desk at the deed, and the property assessment and the breeding contract spread across the surface. Click, click, click. "Beautiful," Brent said, pocketing his phone. I patted my shirt pocket and made a show of looking around the room. Now, where did I put my reading glasses, getting forgetful in my old age? Roxanne's smile widened, warm and false as summer snow. "Oh, Dad, you're sharp as ever." Brent smiled like he'd just won something, but my eyes never left the small black lens in the corner of the room, the security camera Clayton had installed that morning, the one currently recording every angle of my desk and every photo Brent thought he was taking in secret. They thought I was a confused old man. That was exactly what I needed them to believe. The security footage from that night showed Brent's 3 visits to my office each time, checking to see if I'd left the room. I watched it the next morning, with Clayton neither of us saying what we both knew. 3 weeks later, smoke from the BBQ grill rose into the October sky, while my daughter stood on the patio, telling our neighbors that this ranch would belong to her family soon enough. I flipped burgers and pretended not to hear. "Well, sooner or later, this beautiful place will belong to us," Roxanne said, gesturing at the pastures like she already owned them. "Dad won't need all this space forever. A man his age living alone out here, it's really too much." Margaret Henderson from the adjacent property glanced at me uncomfortably. I waved a spatula and grinned like I hadn't heard a word. The October afternoon was cold and bright, Montana sky so blue it hurt to look at. I'd invited a dozen neighbors to celebrate the property, to put down roots in the community Helen had loved. Clayton manned the drink station Kurt showed off the stallion, and my family worked the crowd like they were hosting the event themselves. Brent moved from group to group, asking about property values and development restrictions. He dressed up pressed khakis ranch casual shirt, with the fold creases still visible. He looked like a man auditioning for a role he didn't understand. Then Bernice arrived. She stepped out of Roxanne's rental car carrying homemade pie. Bernice Caldwell, 68 years old, meticulously dressed with silver hair and a grandmother's warm smile, had spent 40 years as a real estate agent, convincing elderly clients to sell their homes below value. She'd retired wealthy while her clients ended up in nursing homes, wondering where their equity went. "Mr. Vernon's sweetheart," she cooed, kissing my cheek. "What a magnificent property." His mother, Roxanne, whispered to Margaret Henderson loud enough for me to hear. "She's been so helpful with the transition planning." Bernice cut into her pie, serving slices to neighbors while holding court near the patio table. I stayed at the grill watching. "The thing about ranch properties," Bernice said, her voice carrying, "is they're retirement gold mines if you position yourself right. Smart families get their names on deeds early, before Dad gets too confused to remember what he promised." She looked directly at me when she said it. "Of course Vernon's still sharp," she added. "For now." Roxanne laughed nervously. "Mom, Bernice, you're terrible." "I'm practical, honey." Bernice patted Roxanne's hand. "Men his age, they forget things. Forget promises, forget who really deserves what. You document everything you hear me." Margaret Henderson excused herself, suddenly interested in the horses. How does a father smile and flip burgers while his own daughter auctions off his future to strangers? I plated the brisket, brought it to the serving table, refilled drinks, played the gracious host, while Bernice coached my daughter on how to rob me. Clayton appeared at my elbow as the sun started dropping. "Boss, need to show you something inside." The office looked untouched, but Clayton pointed to the floor, safe behind my desk. "Last night, someone tried to open it." I knelt down, saw fresh scratches on the lock mechanism. Amateur work, but determined. "Didn't get in," Clayton said. "But they moved papers on your desk afterward, trying to cover their tracks. Files are in a different order than you left them." I stood slowly. "Install cameras in every room tomorrow, corners hidden. And start a log dates times exactly what's been touched." Already ordered the equipment, Clayton said. Arrives Monday. Good man. He hesitated at the door. Vernon, you want me to say something to them? No, I said quietly. Let them think they're getting away with it. After he left, I stood listening to the party continue outside. Laughter music from someone's phone, the sound of people enjoying my hospitality while planning my downfall. I walked to Helen's portrait on the wall, the oil painting I'd commissioned the year before she got sick. She looked out at me with that half smile she always wore when she knew something I didn't. Behind the frame was a small compartment built into the wall. Helen had insisted on it, said every ranch office needed secrets. Inside was a sealed envelope, her handwriting on the front. When they start taking, Helen's handwriting on the envelope, the same careful script that used to leave me love notes, now left me a battle plan. I held it up to the desk lamp. She'd written this before she died, left it here knowing I'd need it. Knowing our daughter would come for the ranch before my side of the bed went cold. The question was what instructions she'd left inside. Helen had always been 10 steps ahead of everyone, including me. Whatever was in this envelope she'd planned for this exact moment, the moment when love stopped being enough, when the only thing left was protecting what we'd built. I slid the envelope into my shirt pocket, sealed side against my heart, and walked back outside to serve pie to the people planning to destroy me. That night I sat with Helen's envelope for a long time. I turned it over and over in my weathered hands, tracing the familiar curves of her elegant handwriting on the front, when they start taking. I wasn't entirely ready to break the seal and open it just yet. However, I understood now with absolute clarity that she had seen this dark day coming long before either of us had the courage to admit it to ourselves. Brent spread the thick legal contract across my wooden kitchen table in November. Each crisp page was meticulously covered in bright yellow sticky notes, flagging exactly where I should sign. There were 17 signatures required in total, 17 distinct strokes of a pen to effectively give my family complete control over everything Helen and I had spent our entire lives building from the ground up. And this is just to help you out, Dad, Brent said, his voice dripping with practiced superficial warmth. You really shouldn't have to manage all of this complicated stuff alone at your advanced age. The endless paperwork, the legal decisions, the breeding schedule. We'll handle all the heavy lifting from now on. I squinted hard at the document, deliberately letting my right hand shake with a manufactured tremor as I reached for the pen. Breeding schedule? I didn't know Wait, where did I leave my reading glasses again? Roxanne appeared at my side instantly as if she had been waiting for the cue. Right here, Dad. Just sign exactly where Brent marked the pages. You trust us, don't you? The contract was professionally drafted, sharp and clinical. The words Family Management Agreement were printed boldly across the top, appointing my children as co-managers to reduce the burden on the primary property owner due to age-related limitations. I read the text slowly, visibly mouthing the words like an old man struggling to comprehend basic English. Page 3 granted them sweeping authority over daily ranch operations. Page 7 covered comprehensive financial management. Page 11, however, was the one that truly mattered. Addendum C, Livestock Asset Monetization and Breeding Rights Authority. The stallion. That was what they were really after. The addendum granted Brent exclusive authority to negotiate lucrative breeding contracts and collect hefty stud fees for all livestock. The Champion Bay generated $40,000 per individual breeding, with multiple contracts signed every single year. Brent would control hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual revenue money I wouldn't even know existed if I were truly as blind as they thought. What's this specific part about breeding rights? I asked, tapping the page with a trembling, hesitant finger. Oh, that's just standard livestock management language, Brent said, quickly brushing it off. Kurt handles the hands-on horse care, but someone needs to manage the complex business side of things. We just don't want you getting stressed out about tense business negotiations, Roxanne added smoothly, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. You just focus on enjoying the ranch, Dad. I picked up the pen, purposely holding it awkwardly, as if my arthritis was flaring up terribly. I started signing the documents slowly, one agonizing signature every 30 seconds. You're doing absolutely great, Dad, Roxanne whispered encouragingly. I wondered, was this exactly how it felt for other elderly parents, watching their own flesh and blood circle like hungry vultures, completely mistaking physical slowness for mental stupidity. I finally signed the very last page. Brent gathered the papers, immediately sliding them swiftly into his leather briefcase before the ink could even dry. This is really going to help everyone out, Vernon." They left the house within 10 minutes of getting what they wanted. Once they were safely gone, I walked back to my office and pulled out the crisp photocopy I'd secretly made while they were both in the bathroom earlier. Every page, every single word of that hidden addendum was now locked in my private safe. 3 weeks later, Bernice drove me all the way to the Livingston Clinic for a routine checkup that I had never asked for. Dr. Gerald Hoffman, a thin, exhausted 50-something physician with tired eyes and a struggling downtown practice that had clearly seen much better decades, barely even looked at me. Instead, he just nodded along passive-aggressively with everything Bernice said. "He's been forgetting things constantly," Bernice told him in a worried tone while I sat quietly on the paper-lined examination table. "Asking the exact same question 4 times in a row. He can't even remember where he puts important legal papers anymore." I said nothing, choosing instead to stare blankly at the stained ceiling tiles above. "How long have you noticed these specific symptoms developing?" Dr. Hoffman asked. He directed the question entirely to Bernice, completely ignoring my presence. "Months now, and it's rapidly getting worse." He briefly listened to my heart, checked my blood pressure, and shined a bright diagnostic light into my eyes. The entire physical examination lasted 4 minutes total. At his advanced age, mild cognitive impairment is incredibly common, the doctor said, smoothly still talking exclusively to Bernice. "I'd highly recommend establishing proper medical directives right now while he can still technically participate. A power of attorney, a healthcare proxy." "I thought so too," Bernice said, her voice filled with mock relief. "In fact, I brought the necessary paperwork with me today." She reached deep into her designer purse and pulled out 2 distinct items. The first was a medical power of attorney form with her own name already neatly pre-filled. The second item was a thick, unmarked white envelope. She set them both directly onto the doctor's cluttered desk. The cash envelope sat on the desk between them for exactly 4 agonizing seconds before Dr. Hoffman's hand closed tightly over it. "I'll write up my official medical assessment immediately," he said, smoothly tucking the envelope into his top desk drawer. "Mild cognitive impairment, strong recommendation for assisted decision-making. That should be more than sufficient for your specific legal needs." Bernice smiled warmly. "Thank you so much, doctor." I buttoned my flannel shirt, slowly continuing to play the part of the confused, oblivious old man who hadn't just witnessed the blatant bribe that bought a completely fraudulent medical diagnosis. The sharp antiseptic smell of the clinic made my throat feel incredibly tight. I couldn't help but wonder how many other vulnerable elderly patients had sat on this exact table while their greedy families paid this corrupt man to declare them legally incompetent. Bernice drove me home, chattering away happily about planning ahead and making sure that the right people could make the tough decisions if my mental state got any worse. I nodded along, submissively asked her to politely repeat herself twice, and thanked her profusely for taking such good care of her old father. She finally left the ranch at sunset, thoroughly satisfied that her plan was succeeding. I waited patiently until the taillights of her car completely disappeared over the hill before pulling my real phone out of my hidden pocket. The text message I sent to Clifford Prescott was only 5 words long. "They have taken the bait." Clifford had been my trusted legal colleague for over 35 years, handling complex ranch disputes all across the state. He knew exactly what the word bait meant in this context, and he knew precisely what kind of legal trap we were carefully building together. His response came back in a matter of seconds. "Documentation successfully received. Keep playing senile. Let them dig their own graves deeper." I stood out on the front porch watching the vast Montana sky slowly turn a deep bruised shade of purple. Helen's hidden letter had given me the necessary framework to see through their greed. Clifford was providing me with the undeniable legal ammunition I needed, and my own ungrateful family was willingly handing me every single piece of evidence required to utterly destroy their ugly conspiracy. They honestly thought they were cleverly stealing my beloved ranch from right out under me. In reality, they were just eagerly building their own prison. Clifford's counter-strategy was beautifully simple. Let them freely commit fraud, document every single misstep, and then use their own mounting crimes to completely void every contract they thought they had stolen from me. The harder they tried to wrest the ranch away, the more damning evidence they unwittingly built against themselves. The land appraiser's white truck suddenly appeared on my property in January, without my permission, driving slow, deliberate circles around the snow-dusted pastures, while Brent walked alongside, eagerly pointing at the fence lines. I watched it all happen, in real time, from Clayton's truck camera feed displayed on my laptop screen. Clayton had discreetly installed high-definition cameras in every single vehicle on the property after the suspicious office break-in. They were motion-activated and instantly uploaded to the cloud. The family mistakenly thought I was far too old and senile to understand modern technology. The appraiser was Rick Baxter, a stocky man in his mid-40s carrying a weathered clipboard and showing absolutely zero interest in who actually owned the historic property he was measuring. He took meticulous notes while Brent talked fast numbers, pointing aggressively at the main barn, the expensive fencing, and the natural water access points. The old man bought it for sentiment, Brent said, his loud voice carrying clearly in the biting January air. But the real value here is the development potential and that champion stallion's genetics. I watched them calmly from my office window, coffee cup in hand, expertly playing the part of the oblivious owner taking a quiet afternoon rest. Kurt was out in the south pasture, training a spirited 3-year-old mare when they walked past. I saw him look up sharply, saw the exact moment he recognized what was happening, an unauthorized appraisal with Brent treating the entire property like it was already his own. Then Brent said something that made Kurt go completely still. "The horse is worth more than the old man. We just need him out of the way long enough to leverage the breeding contracts." Kurt told me later that his hands had gone totally numb on the training line when those words hit him. 20 minutes after the appraiser's truck finally left, Kurt and Clayton came straight to the house. Both of them looked pale, like they had just witnessed something utterly obscene. "He said it like you were already dead, Vernon," Kurt said, his voice noticeably shaking with anger. "Like you were nothing but an obstacle, not the rightful owner." Clayton handed me his phone. He had been recording audio from the truck, capturing the whole conversation. Brent's voice was crystal clear. "The horse is worth more than the old man." Kurt's voice shook again when he recounted what Brent had said. After 30 long years working with horses, he had never heard someone value an animal over a human life so casually. I listened to that recording 3 times. I sent it straight to Clifford, adding it to the rapidly growing digital file of evidence that would eventually destroy them. "Keep working," I told Kurt calmly. "Don't let him know you heard anything. But Vernon, he's actively planning to—" "I know exactly what he's planning," I said quietly, "and he is going to regret every single word." Several months later, in the early summer, I was lying in bed upstairs when I heard hushed voices down in my office below. Low, careful, the distinct sound of people who believed I was fast asleep. I had started going to bed early, playing the part of the exhausted old man who needed 12 hours of sleep. It gave them plenty of time to plot inside my own house while the hidden cameras recorded everything. I got up slowly, moving silently to the top of the stairs where I could hear better. Roxanne's voice drifted up. "He's completely out. We've got maybe an hour before he wakes up, confused about where he is." A laptop chimed downstairs, a video call connecting. "Mr. Townsend." A voice spoke with a thick international accent I couldn't quite place. "You said you have a champion breeding stallion available for immediate purchase." "That's absolutely correct," Brent said. "The stallion can be relocated within 48 hours once the paperwork is handled. The old man won't even know it's gone until it's already done. And the breeding contracts you mentioned, already pre-sold to 3 separate buyers, deposits collected. You'd be purchasing the horse free and clear, and those other contracts, well, they'll be our problem to deal with, not yours." Fraud, plain and simple. He was taking massive deposits for breeding rights he had already illegally sold to someone else. Bernice's voice joined the conversation. "The nursing home already has a room ready for him. Once we get the medical power of attorney finalized, he'll be settled there by spring. Out of the way, properly cared for." "Mom would have wanted us to be taken care of," Roxanne said defensively. "Dad's just being incredibly selfish holding on to all this." I stood at the top of the stairs, listening to my own daughter rewrite history. Helen would have been deeply ashamed of every single word coming out of Roxanne's mouth. Then I heard the soft, distinct creak of a floorboard in the hallway. It was different from the office sounds, much closer. It was Ivy. I stayed completely frozen, didn't move a muscle, didn't even breathe. Through the narrow crack in the stair railing, I could just make out her small shadow in the dim hallway. She had been going to the kitchen for a glass of water. She did that sometimes when she stayed over wandering the house at night, like she couldn't sleep soundly in her parents' presence. She had stopped right outside the office door, The warm light from inside caught her young face. She was 12 years old, with Helen's eyes holding her phone up tight. The screen was lit. A red recording icon was blinking steadily in the corner. Ivy stood frozen in the hallway, an 11-year-old girl watching her mother sell out her grandfather like he was common livestock. "The buyer is ready to wire the deposit immediately," Brent said. "200,000 is earnest money, remaining balance on delivery. The horse will be in Dubai by March." "Perfect," Roxanne said. Ivy's hand trembled. Her thumb moved quickly on the phone screen, stopping the recording, I thought, saving it. Then her face went completely pale. She looked down at the phone, and even from my vantage point on the stairs, I could see the sheer panic in her eyes. The battery icon was flashing bright red, 2% remaining. The recording had been running for 5 minutes, every word of their conspiracy captured beautifully, but the phone was actively dying in her small hands. If she moved, the old floorboard would creak loudly and they would know she had heard everything. If she didn't move, the phone would die completely and the vital video might not save. 11 years old, stuck between betraying her family and protecting her grandfather. She pressed herself hard against the wall, the phone clutched tightly to her chest, as the screen finally went completely dark in her hands. I had coughed deliberately from the top of the dark stairs that night, breaking the suffocating silence and giving young Ivy the perfect cover she needed to slip away unnoticed into the shadows. Her phone died mere seconds later, but the crucial video had already saved 5 minutes of her own parents cold-bloodedly planning to steal everything we owned, automatically backed up to the cloud before the battery went completely dark. I waited until March to act. That was 5 long months after finding that digital file, and 4 weeks after hearing the recording of Brent saying that the horse was worth more than me. I finally sat down to open Helen's envelope in the quiet study where she used to read by lamplight. The paper was thick and expensive, the distinct kind Helen reserved for important correspondence. Her handwriting covered 3 full pages written in the careful, elegant script I had watched her practice for years before the cancer made her hands shake too much to hold a pen steady. "Vernon, if you're reading this, it means they've started circling." The letter began. I saw it clearly in Roxanne's eyes at Christmas. She was already calculating exactly what we were worth dead. I had to stop reading right there. I set the paper down on the desk, forcing myself to breathe through the sudden hot surge of rage. She had known. 6 months before her official cancer diagnosis, Helen had watched our daughter look at us like assets to be liquidated, and she had known. I picked up the letter again, my hands trembling. "I love our daughter, Vernon. I always will. But I've seen what greed does to love. I've watched it happen to other families in this valley, children turning on their parents the moment inheritance became more valuable than relationship. I won't let that happen to you. I won't let them turn what we built into blood money." The very next paragraph made my hands go completely still. "The ranch belongs to the Whitaker Conservation Trust now. Clifford has all the documents we established it last April before I got sick. The property, the stallion, everything, it's fully protected. They can't sell it, mortgage it, develop it, or touch that horse's breeding rights without triggering the forfeiture clause. If anyone tries to commercialize or liquidate the trust assets, they automatically lose all inheritance rights and total control transfers to the Montana Wildlife Heritage Foundation." My coffee had gone cold. I read that single paragraph 3 times, my mind racing. Helen had built a legal fortress around everything we owned, and I had never even known it existed. "You're probably wondering why I didn't tell you," the letter continued. "Because I know you, Vernon Whitaker. You would have confronted Roxanne, immediately tried to fix what was already broken. You would have given her endless chances to prove me wrong, but some things can't be fixed with love, they can only be protected from. Let them show you who they really are, then decide what mercy looks like." The last page contained precise instructions, Clifford's private contact information, specific triggers. For the forfeiture clause and emergency protocols, if they tried to have me declared incompetent or institutionalized. "Don't let anyone turn peace into an asset. This land is for healing, not profit. Keep it wild, keep it free, and when I'm gone, when this is all over, make it mean something bigger than any of us." She had signed it, "Your Helen," with a small heart drawn in the curve of the H. Helen's handwriting blurred through my sudden tears. She had died protecting me from the very people I used to tuck into bed at night. I sat in that study until the sun came up, reading her words over and over, understanding that my wife had been 10 steps ahead of everyone, including me, right up until her last breath. 3 weeks later, I met Clifford at the Mountain View Diner on the edge of Livingston. We sat in a corner booth, the vinyl seats worn smooth by decades of local ranchers and attorneys hammering out deals over coffee and pie. Clifford Prescott, a silver-haired 61-year-old estate attorney with wire-rimmed glasses and 4 decades of trust law experience, reviewed the documents across the table with surgical precision. He had been my colleague when I practiced dispute law, had become a close friend over the years, and now apparently had been Helen's co-conspirator in protecting me from my own family. "She came to my office 14 months ago," Clifford said, tapping Helen's signature on the trust documents. "Walked in without an appointment, told me she needed to make something bulletproof. Said she'd watched Roxanne circle your savings like a hawk watching a field mouse, and she wasn't going to leave you vulnerable." "I never knew," I said softly. "She made me promise not to tell you unless they made a definitive move. Said you'd try to fix it if you knew." He smiled sadly. "She knew you well." The waitress refilled our coffee. I waited until she walked away before pulling out my phone, showing Clifford the recordings. Brent's voice, "The horse is worth more than the old man." The video call about selling the stallion to Dubai. Dr. Hoffman taking the cash bribe from Bernice. Clifford listened to each one twice, making sharp notes in the margins of his legal pad. "Is Helen built you a legal fortress?" he said, finally looking up. "Now we need them to attack it on the record. A fake buyer makes them show their cards in writing. You want me to dangle the stallion like bait and watch them try to sell what they don't own?" Plest symbols. Exactly. Clifford spread the legal documents across the diner table like a general positioning troops before a major battle. "We create a buyer persona, an overseas investor, deep pockets, intensely interested in champion bloodlines. Someone who makes Brent think he can close a 7-figure deal and disappear before anyone realizes the trust restrictions exist. And when he tries to sell, he'll need to sign contracts, send emails, transfer legal documents. Every communication creates ironclad evidence. Wire fraud, elder exploitation, breach of fiduciary duty. We get it all in writing before we pull the trigger." I sip my coffee bitter and strong. "They think I'm too senile to notice them stealing my life." "Good," Clifford said. "Arrogance makes people sloppy, and Brent is desperate enough to be very, very reckless." The plan was elegant, dangerous. It was exactly what Helen would have approved of. Clifford closed the file folder and looked at me over his glasses. "They will hand us the noose themselves, Vernon. All we have to do is give them enough rope." I thought about Brent's arrogant voice in that cold January pasture, about Bernice bribing that corrupt doctor, about my own daughter planning which room to put me in at the nursing home. It was time to let them think they were winning. Over the next few weeks, Clifford worked meticulously to set the trap. He established a digital footprint for our fictional buyer, Al Maktoum Equine Holdings, complete with a professional website, a London-based intermediary, and a bank verification pathway that looked utterly legitimate to anyone blinded by greed. We leaked the information subtly, ensuring it crossed Brent's path through an associate in the breeding circuits. Like a starving fish to a glittering lure, Brent bit down hard. Within 48 hours, Clayton's office cameras caught Brent frantically downloading the stallion's pedigree charts and forging my signature on a letter of intent. He didn't even hesitate. By mid-April, the digital paper trail was becoming a mountain. Brent had exchanged dozens of emails with our fake intermediary, explicitly stating that he possessed sole power of attorney and absolute liquidation authority over all assets of the Whitaker estate. He even went so far as to scan and email the fraudulent medical assessment provided by Dr. Hoffman using the bribe-bought diagnosis to prove I was mentally unfit to block the sale. Every single email, every forged signature, and every electronic wire instruction was routed directly into Clifford's secure servers. They were building a federal case against themselves, page by page, document by document. Meanwhile, I continued my performance at home. I let my hands shake when Bernice brought over my meals. I stared blankly at the wall when Roxanne talked about downsizing to a more comfortable managed living space. I even intentionally mislaid my wallet, letting them find it in the refrigerator so they could exchange satisfied knowing glances behind my back. They thought they were masterminds operating in the shadows of an old man's fading mind. They had no idea that the old man was counting every step they took toward their own ruin. The climax arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning in late May. A sleek black town car pulled down the long gravel driveway of the ranch, carrying the London representative of the buyer, actually a retired federal investigator hired by Clifford. Brent and Roxanne were already waiting on the porch dressed in their finest business attire, smiling like they had just conquered the world. They brought the final sale agreement into the dining room, the very room where Helen used to host Sunday dinners. They didn't even bother to invite me to the table, initially leaving me to sit in my armchair by the window, supposedly lost in a senile fog. The wire transfer for the initial $500,000 is ready to clear, the representative announced, his voice echoing in the quiet house. But I require the final executed deed of transfer signed by the designated co-managers of the estate. Brent practically tripped over himself to grab the pen. Right here, he said, his voice trembling with genuine excitement this time. Roxanne and I have full authority. The old man is completely taken care of. As his pen touched the paper finalizing the fraudulent sale of a trust asset he had no legal right to touch, I stood up from my armchair. My posture straightened. The trembling in my hands vanished. I walked over to the dining room table, looking down at my children. You always did underestimate your mother, Brent, I said, my voice steady, clear, and colder than a Montana winter. The color drained from his face as Clifford Prescott stepped through the front door, flanked by 2 county sheriffs and a state investigator. The trap had officially sprung, and the prison doors were slamming shut. Clifford had found the perfect actor, Gregory Sinclair, who normally helped with witness preparation. We'd paid him well to play a wealthy investor for one afternoon, and he was worth every penny if it made Brent incriminate himself on camera. The black Mercedes pulled up to my ranch in May with an investor Roxanne hadn't bothered to tell me, about a man in an expensive suit who Clifford and I had hired to play the role of his career. Gregory Sinclair, a silver-tongued consultant in his late 50s, who normally helped Clifford's firm with witness preparation, stepped out of the car with practiced enthusiasm. Expensive watch-tailored jacket, the kind of confidence that came from years of pretending to be someone you weren't. Dad, Roxanne called from the passenger seat, waving like this was a pleasant surprise. Mr. Sinclair wanted to see the property. I hope you don't mind. I shuffled to the porch, squinted at them. Do I know you? Did we have an appointment? This is Gregory Sinclair, Roxanne said, speaking slowly like I was hard of hearing. He specializes in converting historic properties to event spaces. Just an informal assessment. Brent climbed out of the back seat, already talking. Dad, this could be incredible for the ranch. Wedding venue, corporate retreats. Mr. Sinclair's done properties all over the Pacific Northwest. I looked at Gregory, who extended his hand with a warm smile. Beautiful property, Mr. Whitaker. Your daughters told me wonderful things. Event space. I said, playing confused. I thought this was a ranch. Where did I put my hat? We walked the property, me shuffling along in worn boots, Gregory asking intelligent questions, Brent answering before I could open my mouth. Clayton trailed 20 feet behind, phone in his pocket, recording everything. The 1948 barn was first. I ran my hand along the weathered wood, remembering the day Helen and I first saw it. The barn can seat 200 guests easy, Brent said, gesturing at the open space where we kept hay bales and equipment. We're talking premium pricing, $15,000 per weekend, booking higher for holidays. The old man doesn't understand the asset he's sitting on. Gregory made appreciative noises, taking photos. The rustic aesthetic is very marketable. Exposed beams, original hardware, couples pay top dollar for authentic Montana charm. Exactly, Brent said. Seasonal capacity we're looking at, maybe 30 weddings a year minimum. That's $450,000 in gross revenue before we even talk about corporate events or photo shoots. I stopped walking, looked around like I'd forgotten where we were. Helen used to love this barn. Are we selling the horses? No, Dad, Roxanne said patiently. Just making better use of the space. How many times can you watch your daughter sell your life's work to strangers before the word daughter stops meaning anything? We walked past the lake across the south pasture where the stallion grazed. Brent kept talking numbers, parking capacity, catering, logistics, liquor licensing. Gregory played his part perfectly enthusiastic, but measured, asking about property restrictions and zoning. All clear, Brent lied. Rural agricultural zoning allows commercial events. We've already looked into it. He hadn't. The Conservation Trust would void any commercial use instantly. When we returned to the house, Roxanne distracted me with questions about the property's history, while Brent drifted toward my office. Through the doorway, I saw him pull out his phone, photographing documents on my desk. Again. Clayton saw it too. adjusted his position, made sure his phone camera had a clear angle. 20 minutes later, Gregory shook my hand, thanked me for the tour, and drove away in his rented Mercedes. I watched the dust settle on the driveway, wondering how long before Brent started taking deposits from imaginary wedding clients. Yet I was making coffee when Bernice arrived. She came through the door without knocking, carrying a manila folder thick with papers. Roxanne followed, looking nervous. "Vernon, honey, we need to talk about your health," Bernice said, settling into the living room chair like she owned it. The evening light was fading, casting long shadows across the room. I sat on the couch, hands folded, the picture of an elderly man bracing for bad news. Bernice opened the folder. Inside were medical documents I'd never seen before. Dr. Hoffman's assessment form checked boxes indicating moderate cognitive impairment. Screening tests I supposedly failed. Recommendations for immediate establishment of medical decision-making support. "Dr. Hoffman says you need someone to help manage your medical decisions," Bernice said, her voice warm as poisoned honey. "Just sign here, and Roxanne and I will make sure you're taken care of." She slid the power of attorney forms across the coffee table, pre-filled, dated, waiting for my signature. I picked up the papers, let my hands tremble, squinted at the text. "What day is it? Did we already have this conversation? I can't remember." "It's Tuesday, Dad," Roxanne said. "We're just trying to help." "Dr. Hoffman mentioned you've been forgetting to take your medications," Bernice added. "And last week you asked Clayton the same question 3 times about the fence repairs." Lies. All of it. But documented lies, official-looking lies, the kind that convince judges to strip people of their autonomy. I set the papers down, looked at Bernice with unfocused eyes, my whole body, the picture of an old man slipping away. Then I let the mask drop. "Do you want to save me or save money, Bernice? As purposes revengestories or restore." My voice came out clear, steady, sharp as a knife. Bernice's smile froze for half a second. She looked like she'd been slapped. Roxanne went still. The question hung in the air between us. Bernice's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, calculation, forced warmth. She recovered quickly, laughing it off like I was having a moment of confusion. "Oh, Vernon, of course we want to help you. What a thing to say." But her hand shook slightly as she gathered the unsigned papers. She'd seen behind the mask, and now she'd have to wonder what else I knew. Bernice left without the signatures that night, but I knew she'd reported my moment of clarity to Brent and Roxanne. They'd be more careful now, or more desperate, probably both. 2 weeks after I challenged Bernice, my 11-year-old granddaughter stood frozen in the upstairs hallway at midnight, phone in hand, accidentally recording her mother and grandmother planning my destruction. I didn't know about it until the next morning. Ivy came to the barn where I was checking on the stallion, her face, pale, eyes red, like she'd been crying all night. She held out her phone without a word. The video was 5 minutes and 38 seconds, her shaking hand, the cracked office door, every word of their plan captured before the battery died. I didn't need to watch it twice to know what it meant. The video shook slightly, Ivy's hand trembling. I could see the battery icon in the corner, 2%. 5 minutes and 30 seconds of my family planning to erase me. "I was getting water," Ivy whispered, watching my face. "I didn't mean to record it. My phone was just... It was already on from texting my friend, and when I heard your name, I froze." I pulled her into a hug. She was 11 years old, and she'd just watched her mother choose money over her own father. Ivy told me later she stopped being a child in that hallway, 11 years old, watching her mother sell out her grandfather like livestock. "You did the right thing," I said quietly. "And Ivy, you're braver than you know." She nodded against my chest, and I felt her shoulders shake with silent sobs. I sent the video to Clifford within the hour, added it to the growing file of evidence that would destroy them. 4 days later, Brent's truck pulled into my driveway with a white van following behind. I was on the porch drinking coffee when they started unloading equipment, lighting stands, photography backdrops, decorative arches made of white painted wood and fake flowers. Brent walked up with his salesman smile firmly in place. "Morning, Vernon. Just doing some test shots for the venue portfolio. Won't take more than an hour." I set down my coffee cup. "What venue?" "The wedding venue we discussed with Mr. Sinclair," Brent said, gesturing at the barn. "We need professional photos to show investors. Just photography. We're not actually running an event." 2 people climbed out of the van. One was a woman in her 30s carrying camera equipment, Stephanie Fletcher, a tired-looking event photographer who clearly just wanted to finish the job and get paid. The other was her assistant hauling light stands toward the barn. I watched them work for exactly 30 seconds. Then I walked across the yard and stood directly in front of the barn doors. "Yes, pack it up," I said. "All of you, leave." Brent laughed like I'd made a joke. "Vernon, it's just test shots. We're not, and this is my property." I said, my voice level and clear. "And I'm telling you to leave. All of you. Now." The photographer stopped mid-setup, looking between us. "Dad, you're being unreasonable," Brent said, the smile fading. "We're family. We're trying to help." "No." The word felt like I'd fired a gun. The yard went silent and everything changed. Brent's face went through several expressions: confusion, anger, calculation. He stepped closer, voice dropping to something meant just for me. "You'll regret this, old man. You have no idea what you just did." I didn't move, didn't blink. Clayton appeared from inside the barn phone in his hand, held at waist level, recording. Brent saw it, went pale. The rage in his eyes flickered to something like fear. He turned to the photographer. "Pack up, we're done here." Stephanie Fletcher didn't need to be told twice. She and her assistant loaded equipment back into the van in under 3 minutes, neither of them making eye contact with anyone. Brent's face was 6 inches from mine, close enough to see the rage burning through the salesman mask. "You'll regret this, old man. You have no idea what you just did." Clayton stepped forward from the barn phone, visible in his hand, recording everything. Brent saw it, went pale, then turned and walked to his truck without another word. I watched the van and truck drive away, dust settling on the gravel. Clayton came to stand beside me. "That went well," he said dryly. "They'd stop pretending," I said. "So did I." "You think he'll back off?" "No," I said, watching the dust cloud disappear down the highway. "I think he'll escalate, which is exactly what we need." Clayton nodded, already uploading the video to Clifford's secure server. The masks were off now. No more pretending this was about family or help or love. It was about money. It had always been about money. And I was done playing the confused old man who didn't see it coming. Brent's retaliation came faster than I expected. 3 days. That's all it took for him to lawyer up and come back swinging. The certified letter arrived at the Livingston post office 3 days after I threw Brent off my property, 6 pages of legal threats demanding I surrender management rights due to my documented cognitive decline and unsafe decision-making. I called Clifford from the post office parking lot. He told me to wait there. He'd be in town in 20 minutes. 18 minutes later, he pulled up in his truck and I climbed into the passenger seat, the certified letter still in its envelope. "They're threatening guardianship proceedings," I said, handing it to him. "They want me declared incompetent." Clifford opened the envelope, carefully unfolded the pages and started reading. I watched his face, waiting for concern, alarm, something. Instead, he smiled. "This is from Marcus Brennan," Clifford said, reading the letterhead. "Cut-rate estate attorney out of Bozeman. Bernice probably found him on Google. He does will kits and basic trusts, has no business handling guardianship cases." He kept reading, and his smile grew wider. "Vernon, this letter is a gift. A gift they're trying to take away my rights. They just put their conspiracy in writing on official letterhead with specific demands." He pointed to a paragraph halfway down page 2. "Look, it references Dr. Hoffman's assessment as evidence of cognitive impairment. There had been a second opinion too, a neurologist named Ashford who Bernice had brought in quietly the previous spring, whose signature appeared on supplemental paperwork, claiming I'd failed memory screening. 2 doctors. 1 conspiracy. It demands you surrender temporary management authority pending full medical evaluation. It specifically mentions your refusal to sign the breeding rights agreement as proof of poor judgment." I read the section he indicated. Every word documented the fake medical assessment, the breeding rights scheme, the coordinated effort to strip my autonomy. Every threat they made was another strand of rope, and Clifford was weaving them into a noose. "They coordinated this," Clifford said. "Bernice hired the lawyer, gave him Dr. Hoffman's fraudulent documents, and instructed him to make specific threats. That's conspiracy to commit elder abuse in writing, with attorney letterhead, making it admissible in court." "So what do we do?" "Nothing," Clifford said. "We let them take the next step. We need them to make a mistake in public where a judge can see it. This is exactly what we've been waiting for." The July heat was building outside, but the truck's air conditioning kept the cab cool. I looked at the letter again, seeing it differently now. Not a weapon pointed at me, but evidence of their own crimes. "How long until they file the guardianship petition?" "En que bond estes pidouillos. 2 weeks, maybe 3, Clifford said. Brennan will advise them to build a stronger case first. More doctor visits, more documentation of your supposed incompetence, which gives us time to prepare our counterattack. He folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope. Come with me, he said. There's something I want to check at the land registry office. The Park County Land Registry Office was a squat brick building on the edge of town, the kind of government facility that hadn't been updated since 1985. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across rows of filing cabinets and computer terminals that looked older than ivy. Clifford knew the clerk, everyone in Montana legal circles knew everyone, and within 10 minutes we were in the back records room with a stack of property documents spread across a metal table. When Helen established the trust, she filed supplemental documents. Clifford said, flipping through deed transfers and title records. I helped her with the framework, but she handled some of the detail work herself. Said she wanted certain protections in place that even you wouldn't know about until the time was right. He pulled out a document dated 14 months ago, 6 months before Helen died. Conservation easement, he read aloud. Filed with the Montana Land Reliance permanent restriction on development and commercial use. His finger traced down the page, and I watched his expression shift from curiosity to something like awe. Permanent conservation easement prohibits commercial event facilities, forbids exploitation of breeding stock for commercial purposes. Helen Yu, brilliant woman. What does that mean? Clifford looked up at me, his eyes bright. This means Brent can't build the wedding venue. Not legally, not ever. The easement makes any commercial event use a violation that would trigger automatic forfeiture of the property to the Montana Wildlife Heritage Foundation. My hand was shaking when I took the document from him. Helen's signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized. Filed 4 months before her cancer diagnosis, like she'd known exactly what was coming. Helen had been dead 18 months, but she was still protecting me, still 10 steps ahead of everyone, including the daughter she'd raised. And the breeding contracts, I asked. In same restriction. Clifford said, pointing to paragraph 3. Prohibits commercial exploitation of livestock genetics. Personal breeding for ranch sustainability is fine. Selling stud fees for profit violation. I set the document down on the table, my throat tight. Brent's been pitching investors on a venue that can't legally exist, I said, and breeding rights he can't legally sell. Correct. Any investor doing proper due diligence would pull these property records and discover the easement immediately. Which means Brent is either ignorant or committing fraud. I finished. Clifford photocopied the easement documents and slid them into his briefcase with the demand letter. Let them invite investors over one more time, Vernon. Let Brent make his pitch about wedding revenues and breeding contracts. When those investors hire lawyers to check the property records, they'll find this, and they'll know he tried to defraud them. I thought about Gregory Sinclair's fake tour, Brent talking about gross revenue and seasonal capacity while standing on property he could never commercialize. Every word a lie, every promise impossible. So we wait, I said. We wait, Clifford confirmed. And we let Brent destroy himself. The trap was set. All we had to do was wait for greed to spring it. We didn't have to wait long. Greed has its own timeline, and Brent was running out of money. The trap sprung on a Tuesday night in August when Brent sat in my office thinking I was asleep upstairs and took a video call with a man offering $450,000 for breeding rights to a horse Brent didn't own. I was in my bedroom with the lights off, laptop open, watching Clayton's camera feed in real time. Clifford had reviewed the recording with me that morning, both of us listening in silence. Brent and Roxanne had set up the laptop on my desk, the screen casting blue light across their faces. They'd drawn the curtains, turned off the overhead light, whispering like thieves. At 8 o'clock, the video call connected. Harrison Blackwell appeared on screen, a retired rancher and former client of Clifford's, who had agreed to play the eager Texas buyer for $500 and a good story. Silver hair, weathered face, the kind of credibility that came from 40 years running cattle in West Texas. Mr. Townsend. Harrison said, his drawl thick and authentic. Appreciate you taking the time. I've done my research on that stallion of yours. Champion bloodlines, proven genetics, exactly what I need for my breeding program. We're excited about the opportunity, Brent said, leaning forward. This horse has generated significant interest from multiple parties. Liar. The only interest had come from our actor. I'll get right to it, Harrison said. I'll wire $450,000 to escrow tomorrow morning. Exclusive breeding rights transfer in 30 days. Standard commercial terms, 30% of future stud fees paid quarterly. You have legal authority to execute this contract. I watched Brent's face on the camera feed. No hesitation, no doubt. Full authority, Brent said smoothly. The old man signed management rights over to us last month. I have complete authorization. I'll text you the escrow account details and timeline right now. Roxanne shifted in her chair. Should we wait until Dad? Yeah, the buyer's ready. Brent cut her off. We close this tonight or we lose it. Roxanne went quiet. Brent pulled out his phone, thumbs flying. I watched the text go out, account numbers, wire, transfer instructions, timeline for moving the stallion. 9:47 p.m. Time-stamped. Permanent. Brent texted the wire transfer details at 9:47 p.m. Proof he believed he had authority to sell my horse, time-stamped and permanent. Perfect, Harrison said. My attorneys will pull the property records tomorrow for due diligence, just making sure there are no liens or restrictions on the livestock assets. Brent nodded enthusiastically, missing the trap completely. All clear, no restrictions whatsoever. Another lie, another piece of evidence. The conservation easement would show up the moment Harrison's fictional attorneys pulled the records. Every promise Brent just made was legally impossible. The call lasted 18 minutes. By the end, Brent had sent 6 text messages, 2 voice recordings detailing transfer logistics, and a follow-up email confirming all the deal terms. Clifford's voice came through my phone after they disconnected. We have him, Vernon. Wire fraud, attempted theft, elder exploitation, all documented with electronic records he can't deny. I watched Brent and Roxanne celebrate in my office, pouring whiskey from my desk drawer, toasting their success. They had no idea they just handed us everything we needed to destroy them. 2 weeks later, I sat in Dr. Hoffman's examination room, with Bernice at my side, playing the confused elderly patient one more time. The doctor looked tired, thinner. He kept glancing at his phone on the examination table like he was waiting for bad news. He was. Just a routine follow-up, I said cheerfully, making sure everything's cognitively stable. Dr. Hoffman forced a smile. Yes, how have you been feeling, Mr. Whitaker? Good, although I'm confused about something. I pulled out the medical assessment. When did I take that memory test? You mentioned I thought that was November, but the paperwork says December. The doctor's eyes flicked to the document, then to Bernice. Well, the initial screening was, you came in twice, so the dates... I only came in once, doctor, I said calmly. In December, with Mrs. Caldwell here. I remember it quite clearly. Remember, his face flushed. Yes, of course, the December visit. I must have... The records sometimes get entered incorrectly. And these cognitive screening questions, I continued. It says I completed them on November 18th, but I was in Bozeman that entire day. Clayton drove me to pick up equipment. We have receipts, credit card records, even time-stamped photos. Dr. Hoffman's hand shook as he took the form. There may have been an administrative error. Or the test never happened, I said quietly. The room went silent. Dr. Hoffman's phone vibrated on the examination table between us, loud in the quiet. He glanced down, and his face went from pink to gray in 2 seconds. Watching the doctor's face drain of color when his phone buzzed was sweeter than any courtroom victory I'd ever won. I'm sorry, Dr. Hoffman stammered. I need to take this. It's urgent. But I'd already seen the notification. So had Bernice. Montana State Medical Board, complaint number 2025-0847, formally received. Review committee assigned. His hand shook as he picked up the phone, trying to turn the screen away. I'll need to reschedule your appointment. Something urgent has come up. Bernice stood up, her face hard. What complaint? I can't discuss ongoing board investigations, Dr. Hoffman said, backing toward the door. Patient privacy. I'm sorry, I really need to... He left the examination room without finishing the sentence. Bernice turned to me, slowly fear in her eyes, for the first time since I'd met her. What did you do? She asked. I stood up, grabbed my hat from the chair. I got a second opinion, Bernice. From doctors who don't accept cash payments and white envelopes for fraudulent diagnoses. Her face went pale. You recorded everything, I said simply. You should probably find yourself a different doctor for whatever scheme you're planning next. This one's going to be very busy with the medical board for quite a while. I walked out of the clinic, leaving her standing alone in the examination room, with all her carefully forged paperwork suddenly worthless. Bernice called Roxanne the moment I left the clinic. I knew because 2 days later, my daughter showed up with a new strategy, softer, sweeter, more dangerous. My daughter arrived on a September afternoon, carrying her grandmother's pie recipe, and the kind of smile that told me she wanted something, Ivy trailing behind her like a ghost, clutching her phone with both hands. The pie was still warm, wrapped in the same checkered cloth Helen used to use. Apple cinnamon, Helen's specialty. The recipe she'd taught Roxanne when our daughter was 8 years old, and still thought her mother hung the moon. "Dad, my skis," Roxanne said, setting the pie on the dining room table like an offering. I wanted to come by, just us, talk without all the tension. Ivy stood in the doorway, not coming in, not leaving. Her face was pale, her hands wrapped around that phone like it was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. "Pie looks good," I said, pulling out a chair. "Your mother taught you well." Roxanne's smile brightened, encouraged. "I know things have been tense. Between you and Brent, the misunderstandings about the ranch plans, all the stress, I just want us to be a family again." She cut 2 slices of pie-poured coffee from the pot I'd made an hour ago, settled into the chair across from me, with a performance of concerned daughter that would have won awards if it weren't so transparently calculated. How have you been feeling?" she asked. "Really feeling? We've been worried about you out here alone making big decisions without support. When did my daughter learn to weaponize her dead mother's pie recipe?" "I've been fine," I said, taking a bite of pie. It tasted exactly like Helen's. That made it worse somehow. "Managing the ranch keeps me busy. Clayton and Kurt handle most of the heavy work." "That's actually what I wanted to talk about." Roxanne reached into her bag, pulled out a folder. "Estate planning. I know it's not fun to think about, but you're 69, Dad. We should have things organized, clear. This paperwork is simple. It just protects you and makes sure everything goes smoothly in the future." She slid the folder across the table. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I looked at Ivy still standing in the doorway, her eyes fixed on the folder like it was a snake coiled to strike. "What exactly am I signing?" Roxanne walked me through each section. "I want to understand." Roxanne's smile tightened slightly. "It's just standard estate documents, durable power of attorney healthcare directive property management authorization. Clifford could explain it better, but basically it ensures that if something happens to you, if you get sick, if you need help, the family can step in smoothly without court delays or complications." "Clifford's my attorney," I said mildly. "Why didn't he prepare these documents?" "Well, we thought Brent knows an estate attorney who does this kind of work all the time. Marcus Brennan, very experienced. The same attorney who'd sent me the guardianship threat letter, of course." I opened the folder, started reading. The language was dense legal, designed to look routine, but buried in Section 7 was the real purpose: immediate transfer of property management authority to Roxanne and Brent, effective upon my signature. No waiting for incapacity, no medical determination, just my signature, and they'd control everything. "This gives you authority over the ranch," I said, "over the trust Helen established." "Only to help," Roxanne said quickly. "To make sure bills get paid, decisions get made. You'd still own everything, Dad. We just handle the paperwork." Another lie. The Conservation Trust made their authority meaningless, but they didn't know that yet. I set down the pen, looked at my daughter's face, saw the calculation behind the concern, the impatience behind the smile, saw how much she looked like Bernice in that moment. Same false warmth, same predatory patience. Then I looked at Ivy. The girl was shaking, phone gripped in both hands, eyes moving between her mother and me like she was watching 2 cars on a collision course. "Ivy," I said gently, "come sit down, sweetheart." Roxanne's hand moved to stop her. "She's fine where she is. Aren't you, honey? Why don't you go wait in the car?" "No," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Ivy, stay." The girl took 3 steps into the room and stopped frozen. Ivy's eyes met mine, and I saw Helen looking back, the same quiet courage, the same refusal to participate in a lie, even when it cost her. "Dad just signed the documents," Roxanne said, her voice hardening. "This is for your own good. You're not thinking clearly. Dr. Hoffman said..." "Oh, Dr. Hoffman is under investigation by the medical board," I said quietly. "For fraudulent diagnoses. Did Bernice tell you that part, Roxanne went very still. "Did she tell you I recorded him accepting cash from her, that Clifford filed a formal complaint, that every piece of paper with his signature is now evidence in a fraud investigation? My daughter's face cycled through emotions too fast to track. Shock, denial, fear. Then something harder, calculation about how to salvage the situation. She turned to Ivy. "Go to the car, now." But I stood up, walked around the table, and placed my hand gently on Ivy's shoulder. The girl was trembling so hard, I could feel it through her thin jacket. "Is there something you want to say, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice soft. My hand rested on Ivy's shoulder, and I could feel her trembling. Roxanne's smile had frozen into something sharp and warning. "Ivy has nothing to say, Dad. She's just tired." But Ivy's fingers were still wrapped around that phone, knuckles white. I kept my voice gentle, my eyes only on my granddaughter. "Is there something you want to say, sweetheart?" Ivy looked at her mother, then at me, then down at the phone in her hands. Roxanne's face had gone hard, warning, but when Ivy spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I have something to show, Grandpa." Then she turned and walked out of the house before her mother could stop her. Ivy came to me in the horse stable 3 hours after her mother left, 11 years old, clutching her phone like it was evidence of a crime, which I suppose it was. She didn't say anything at first, just held the phone out, the video already queued up. I watched her face more than the screen, saw the moment she'd stopped being a child, saw what it cost her to walk into the barn and hand me the truth about her own mother. I pulled her into a hug when it finished. "You did nothing wrong," I said quietly. "You're the bravest person I know." She nodded against my chest, and I felt her shoulders shake with silent sobs. I sent the video to Clifford within the hour. I held Ivy until she stopped shaking, then sent her up to the house with Clayton to get something to eat. The ranch, I told her, would always be her safe place. No matter what happened with her parents, she had a home here. After she left, I stood in the stable with the stallion, watching him breathe in the dim light. The horse they'd tried to sell, the property they'd tried to steal, the life they'd tried to institutionalize away. I pulled out my phone and called Clifford. "We finished this before winter," I said when he answered. "I have everything we need." 2 weeks later, I sat in Clifford's office signing revocation documents, page after page of legal notices canceling every scrap of authority Brent and Roxanne had claimed through their fraudulent management agreements and forged medical assessments. "These revocations are effective immediately," Clifford said, organizing the signed pages into neat stacks. "By tomorrow afternoon, every institution will have formal notice that Brent Townsend has zero authority over your assets. Bank accounts, insurance policies, livestock registrations, property records, everything." He'd drafted letters for every financial institution where Brent had tried to establish signing authority. Each letter included copies of the medical board complaint against Dr. Hoffman, evidence of the forged documents, and formal revocation of any permissions previously granted. "What about the guardianship petition?" I asked. "Filed formal objections this morning," Clifford said. Attached Ivy's video, the medical board complaint, proof of Dr. Hoffman's bribe, and documentation of Brent's wire fraud attempt with the fake buyer. No judge will grant guardianship with that evidence file. Each signature on the revocation documents was another door slamming shut. I was systematically cutting off every escape route they thought they had. Clifford leaned back in his chair, studying me over his wire-rimmed glasses. "When they find out, what do you think they'll do?" "Panic, Amoskis," I said. "Brent has over $900,000 in debt coming due. He was counting on the stallion sale to cover it. Roxanne was counting on the wedding venue revenue. Bernice already put a deposit down at Sunset Ridge. So they're financially desperate, legally blocked, and about to discover every institution has been warned they're fraudsters." Clifford's smile was cold. "They are going to lose their minds and do something reckless. And when they do, we'll have them." I thought about Ivy's trembling hands holding that phone, about Helen's conservation trust, protecting what we'd built, about 12 months of watching my family try to steal my life while I documented every crime. "How reckless do you think they'll get?" Clifford slid the stack of certified mail receipts across his desk, proof every institution had been notified by 5 p.m. that day. "They are going to lose their minds and do something reckless, Vernon. Desperate people make mistakes." I thought about Brent's debt, about Bernice's nursing home deposit, about Roxanne's face when she realized her daughter had chosen me. Desperate was exactly what I was counting on. The revocation letters hit every institution at once, banks, insurance companies, the title registry. Clifford had timed it perfectly. When they received the revocation letters on October 15th, It took Brent exactly 4 hours to show up at my door, with Roxanne and Bernice demanding I stop this nonsense and sign over management like we agreed. I was sitting on the porch when they pulled up 3 of them, piling out of Brent's truck like they were coming to stage an intervention. "You can't do this," Brent said, waving the bank letter in my face. "You signed the management agreement. We have authority." "That agreement was based on fraudulent medical assessments," I said calmly. "Dr. Hoffman is under investigation. Any document he signed is worthless." Bernice's face went hard. "Vernon, you're being unreasonable. We're family. We're trying to help." "Help yourselves, you mean?" Roxanne stepped forward, her voice softer. "Dad, please. Can we just talk inside like a family?" I looked at my daughter's face, saw the calculation behind the concern, and made my decision. "Fine," I said, standing up slowly like the effort cost me. "Come inside." We sat in the living room, me in Helen's old chair, them on the couch like a panel of judges. The October afternoon light came through the windows, cold and pale. "What do you want?" I asked. Brent pulled out fresh paperwork. "Just sign this. Temporary family management. 6 months. Gives us authority to handle, bills manage the property, make sure everything runs smoothly. And if I refuse, then we file the guardianship petition," Bernice said. "We have Dr. Hoffman's assessment documentation of your confusion evidence you can't manage alone. A judge will appoint us anyway." I let the silence stretch. Let them think I was weighing my options, considering surrender. "If I'm going to hand over management," I said slowly, "I want it done right, public, transparent, a celebration with neighbors, family, friends. Everyone should see this generous arrangement." Brent and Roxanne exchanged glances. Quick, excited. "A public announcement," Brent said. That's actually a great idea. Shows everything's legitimate." They thought I'd surrendered. They didn't realize I'd just chosen the battlefield. "We can host it here at the ranch," Roxanne said, warming to the idea. "Catered event, formal ceremony, November 1st. Gives us 2 weeks to prepare." "Make it a celebration," I said. "Invite everyone. Film it. I want the whole community to witness my family's generosity." Bernice smiled, triumphant. "Finally you see reason, Vernon. Finally." They left an hour later with my verbal agreement to sign at the public event, already planning the guest list and the formal presentation. They thought they'd won, thought I'd broken under pressure. They didn't realize I'd just demanded the public stage where I planned to destroy them. 2 weeks passed. They were busy planning their celebration, their public victory. I was busy with Clifford, making sure every piece of evidence was organized, every witness prepared, every legal document ready. Then Brent made his last desperate play. Clayton called me on October 28th. "Boss Brent's here with 2 men in suits. Says they're investors looking at development financing. Wants to tour the property." "I let them," I said, "and call Clifford. Tell him the investors are here." I watched from the barn window as Brent walked the property with 2 middle-aged men in expensive coats pointing at the barn, the pastures gesturing enthusiastically. His last shot at legitimate financing before his debt came due. Clifford worked fast. Within an hour, he'd anonymously provided the conservation easement documents to the investors' legal team during their routine due diligence check. Before I reveal what happened when those investors arrived at the ranch, comment A or B and tell me why A equals Vernon should expose them immediately or B equals let them dig themselves deeper first. Quick note. The next part includes some recreated details for narrative depth and emotional impact. I was in the barn with Clayton when the investor's attorney called them. We couldn't hear the conversation, but we saw Brent's face change confidence to confusion, to pale understanding. The investors packed up and left within 10 minutes, didn't even finish the tour. Brent stood in the driveway watching them drive away, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand running through his hair over and over. Bernice appeared from somewhere, walked over to him. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw Brent's gestures, desperate, frustrated, trapped. November 20th. 3 weeks until Brent's debt came due. 3 weeks until desperation made him commit the crime I needed him to commit. Clayton had positioned himself close enough to hear. He came back to the barn 10 minutes later. "What did they say?" I asked. Clayton's face was grim. The investor's attorney told them about the conservation easement, said either Brent lied or didn't do his homework. Either way, the wedding venue scheme violates permanent land restrictions, legally impossible. And Brent told Bernice that was his last shot at refinancing, said the debt's due November 20th. Clayton paused. Then he said, "We have to sell the horse. It's the only asset left that can cover the $900,000. I looked out the barn window. Brent and Bernice were still talking, making plans, calculating their desperate next move. They were going to attempt to sell my champion stallion, the one asset protected by Helen's conservation trust, the one transaction that would trigger automatic forfeiture of all inheritance rights, and give me everything I needed for criminal charges. Brent's words hung in the cold October air. We have to sell the horse. Bernice nodded slowly, already scheming. They were going to attempt to sell my champion stallion, the one asset that would trigger forfeiture, and hand me criminal evidence. I watched from the barn window as they made their plan, and I smiled. They just decided to hand me the evidence that would destroy them. Brent moved fast once he made his decision. Within 48 hours, he'd contacted 3 potential buyers for the stallion's breeding rights. I knew because Clayton had placed a voice-activated recorder in my home office, entirely legal under Montana's one-party consent law, since I was the property owner, and consented to the recording on my own premises. The bank called Brent on November 3rd to confirm his $900,000 loan maturity date, November 22nd, the day before Thanksgiving, 18 days away. And I listened to every word through the phone tap Clifford had legally arranged as part of the fraud investigation. Brent was in his apartment garage when the call came through. I could hear the echo of the concrete walls, the background hum of traffic from the Bozeman Street outside. Mr. Townsend, this is Sarah Gunderson from First Montana Bank. I'm calling to confirm your commercial loan maturity date of November 22nd. The outstanding balance is $903,477. Are you prepared to satisfy the loan in full on that date? Silence. 5 seconds of it. November 22nd confirmed. Brent said finally, his voice thin. Yes, I understand the penalties for default. He hung up. I heard the phone clatter onto something metal, heard him swear under his breath. Then Bernice's voice, how bad? $903,000 by November 22nd. Brent said, default penalties are brutal. They'll seize everything, the apartment, at the car, my business accounts. Everything. And then we don't default? Bernice said, her voice cold and calculating. The stallion is worth $450,000 to that Texas buyer. We close the deal by the 15th, move Vernon to Sunset Ridge. By the 18th, use the celebration on the 20th as the transition story. Once he's institutionalized, we liquidate personal assets, jewelry, equipment, whatever liquid capital is accessible. Between the horse and liquidation, we cover the debt. Roxanne's voice hesitant. What if Dad fights being moved? We have Dr. Hoffman's assessment, Bernice said. He's legally incompetent according to medical records. It's not his choice anymore. We're acting in his best interest, that's what the paperwork says. 18 days, that's how long Brent had to commit fraud, elder abuse, and theft before his financial empire collapsed. And the celebration event, Brent asked. Perfect cover, Bernice said. We presented as Vernon voluntarily transitioning to assisted living, celebrating his legacy, handing management to family who'll protect his interests. Neighbors see a generous old man making wise choices. Nobody questions it. I listened to them plan my imprisonment like it was a business transaction. Listened to my daughter agree to every step. Clifford was on the line with me, recording everything on his end as backup. When they finally hung up, he said quietly, they just gave us a complete timeline and motive. 18 days to document every crime. Starting now, I said. 1 week later, Bernice and Roxanne drove to Sunset Ridge Assisted Living Facility in Bozeman. Clayton had a contact there. A nurse's aide who'd worked the ranch circuit knew what real elder care looked like versus warehousing. She texted me when they arrived. 2 women here asking about memory care for a Mr. Whitaker. Want me to listen? Please, I texted back. 20 minutes later, she sent me the details. Director Ellen Hobbs, a well-meaning administrator in her early 60s who'd run Sunset Ridge for 15 years, had no idea she was being used as an accessory to elder imprisonment. She gave them the full tour private room in the memory care wing, 24-hour supervision, locked doors for resident safety. The memory care suite is $8,500 per month, Director Hobbs said, according to my contact. With the medical assessment you've provided, we can admit Mr. Whitaker for respite care starting November 18th. Perfect, Bernice said. We'll bring him that morning. He's confused about needing help, so the transition may require some firmness. We have staff trained in gentle redirection, Director Hobbs assured her. Many residents resist initially, but adjust within a few days. They placed a $5,000 deposit, signed intake paperwork, listed me as having moderate cognitive decline and requiring 24-hour supervision for safety. Used Dr. Hoffman's fraudulent assessment as medical justification. Scheduled my imprisonment for November 18th, 2 days before the public celebration, where they'd tell everyone I'd chosen this voluntarily. My contacts sent me photos of the paperwork, every lie documented, every signature captured. They were picking out the room where they'd imprison me, and I was picking out the handcuffs they'd wear. I sat in my truck in the ranch driveway looking at those photos on my phone and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger anymore, not even hurt, just absolute clarity about what needed to happen. I pulled up my contacts, found the number Clifford had given me weeks ago, and sent a text. Sheriff Garrison, this is Vernon Whitaker. I need you present on November 20th. The ranch. Official capacity. Evidence of elder exploitation will be presented. Wade Garrison, a 52-year-old county sheriff with steel gray eyes and 25 years of reading people's lies, responded to my text with the professional brevity of someone who'd been expecting this call. Will attend in official capacity. Recommend recording equipment and witness documentation. This going where I think it's going. Ombot dawaingdik em omon mandastines. I typed back exactly where you think. Bring everything. His response came through 5 minutes later. Understood. We'll coordinate with County DA's office. Document everything between now and the 20th. I forwarded the entire text chain to Clifford, then sat in my truck, watching the sun set over the Montana mountains. November 20th was 17 days away. Brent would try to sell the stallion by the 15th 5 days. They'd attempt to force me into Sunset Ridge on the 18th 15 days. And then, on the 20th in front of neighbors, friends, and the county sheriff, they'd present their fraud as family celebration. The sheriff would be there, the cameras would be rolling, and my family would incriminate themselves in front of the law. 3 days until their deadline, 10 days until their destruction. Wade Garrison confirmed he'd be there in plainclothes recording equipment ready. Clifford had the evidence organized in 3 briefcases. Clayton and Kurt knew their positions. Everything was set for November 20th. 7 days before the gala, I stood at the training arena fence watching a 9-year-old girl who'd lost her mother to cancer brush the champion stallion's mane, the same stallion my family planned to sell in 3 days. And I knew Helen had been right about everything. The girl's name was Emma. She hadn't spoken since her mother died in August. Her father told me she'd stopped smiling, stopped eating properly, wandered through the house like a ghost looking for someone who was never coming back. But when Kurt lifted her up to stand on the fence rail and the stallion walked over, lowering his massive head so she could touch him, something changed in her face. "He's so big," she whispered, first words in 3 months. Her father started crying. There were 5 children that afternoon, ages 7 to 12, all of them carrying the weight of parents lost to cancer. The inaugural session of the Helen Whitaker Memorial Equine Therapy Program, held in the training arena with a hand-carved wooden sign bearing Helen's name. I'd invited their families, a few volunteers, Kurt and Clayton, to help. Small group, quiet ceremony. The kind of thing Helen would have loved, no fuss, just purpose. This ranch will be a place where children who've lost what my grandchildren and I lost can find some peace, I told the gathered parents. It's what Helen wanted, what she planned before she died. A living memorial, a healing space. Kurt worked with Emma and the stallion. Clayton showed 2 boys how to groom the mares. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the snow-dusted arena, and for the first time in 18 months, I felt like I was doing something Helen would recognize. That little girl smiling at the stallion was everything proof that some things can't be bought, sold, or stolen, no matter how desperate you are. Roxanne and Brent watched from the house. I saw them in the window, Roxanne's phone pressed to her ear, her face pale even from a distance. Later, Clayton told me what he'd overheard when he walked past the open window. "He's turning it into a non-profit," Roxanne said, her voice sharp with panic. "If that gets registered, we can't touch any of it. We have to move the gala up, do this now before he makes the therapy program official." But the gala was already scheduled, November 20th. They couldn't move it without looking suspicious, and they needed the public legitimacy. They were trapped by their own timeline. November 20th arrived cold and clear. The ranch was transformed. Brent had spent thousands on the production massive LED screen mounted behind a wooden stage professional sound system, white tent with heaters, catered food, decorative lighting strung through the bare November trees. 70 people confirmed, neighbors, local business owners, people from church families from the therapy program trial. It looked like a celebration. It was supposed to look like a celebration. I stood in my bedroom getting dressed, looking at Helen's portrait on the wall. The envelope she'd left me sat on the dresser, sealed, waiting. "They're going to hate me for this," I said to her picture. "Roxanne's going to hate me." Helen's painted smile seemed to say, "Then you raised her wrong, or you're doing something right." Clayton knocked on the door. "Guests are arriving. Clifford's here. So is the sheriff. In uniform, plain clothes, back row, phone ready." I picked up Helen's envelope and went downstairs. The yard was full by 7 o'clock. White tent, glowing heaters, humming people in winter coats, holding drinks and making small talk. The stage stood empty, LED screen, dark microphone, waiting. Sheriff Wade Garrison stood near the back fence, looking like any other neighbor in jeans and a ranch coat. His phone was in his hand, angled toward the stage. Clifford sat in the third row, 3 briefcases at his feet, looking calm as Sunday morning. Clayton and Kurt positioned themselves at opposite sides of the crowd, watching. Brent worked the audience like a politician, shaking hands, thanking people for coming. Bernice stood near the stage in a navy dress and pearls, looking like somebody's kind grandmother, instead of the woman who'd bribed a doctor and picked out my prison room. Roxanne climbed the stage steps at 7:30, microphone in hand, smile bright and hollow. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she said, her voice amplified across the yard. "We're here to celebrate something important, my father's wise decision to let his family help him manage this beautiful property. It's been a hard year for all of us, losing my mother, watching Dad struggle with the ranch alone. But tonight, we're announcing a new chapter." The crowd murmured approval. They didn't know. How could they know? "Dad's worked so hard to build this place," Roxanne continued, "and now he's trusting us, his family, to protect what he and Mom created. It's an honor. It's a responsibility we take seriously." She looked at me, standing at the base of the stage. "Dad, come up and say a few words." The crowd went silent, 70 people, 1 microphone, and the truth about to detonate. I climbed the stage steps, slowly feeling every one of my 69 years, Helen's envelope in my hand. Brent stood at the side of the stage, confident. Bernice smiled at me like we were allies. Roxanne handed me the microphone. "Thank you," I said, my voice carrying across the silent yard. "I do have something to say, something important, something my wife Helen left for me to share at exactly this moment." Brent's smile faltered. "What envelope? What is he talking about?" I held it up so everyone could see Helen's handwriting across the front, clear, even in the stage lights. "When they start taking." "I also have an announcement to make," I said into the microphone. Roxanne's smile froze. Wade Garrison's phone camera recorded. Clifford's hand rested on his briefcase, and 70 neighbors waited to hear what I had to say. I opened my mouth to speak, but Roxanne was faster. Before I could say another word, Roxanne took the microphone from my hand, her smile bright and false under the stage lights, and told 70 witnesses that I'd agreed to hand my ranch over to my loving family, and I let her keep talking because I wanted every lie on record. "We're so grateful Dad finally understands that family means letting us help manage his legacy." Roxanne said, her voice amplified across the silent yard. "This beautiful property deserves professional development, the kind of vision that honors what Mom and Dad built while securing its future." The crowd nodded, neighbors smiled. They didn't know yet. Brent stepped forward onto the stage, unable to resist the spotlight, and I watched him seal his own fate. "This ranch has incredible untapped potential," Brent said, taking the microphone from Roxanne. "The wedding venue alone generates $400,000 annually with proper management. The champion stallion's breeding rights properly commercialized add another $300,000 in revenue. Vernon's been sitting on a gold mine, and now we can finally unlock that value while ensuring he's comfortable and cared for." He said it like he already owned it, said it with numbers and projections and the casual confidence of a man who thought he'd won. Brent said $400,000 annually, like he already owned it, and I watched 70 faces turn from congratulation to suspicion in real time. The crowd's energy shifted, smiles fading, whispers starting. Margaret Henderson from the adjacent property leaned toward her husband, frowning. "Of course, Dad's well-being comes first," Roxanne added, quickly sensing the mood change. "We've arranged excellent care at Sunset Ridge, where he'll have professional medical supervision. Thank you both for that illuminating presentation," I said, reclaiming the microphone from Brent's hand. My voice was calm, steady. "Now I'd like to share what my late wife Helen left for me to show you all tonight." Roxanne's smile froze. Brent's confident posture cracked. I looked at Clayton standing by the equipment station at the side of the stage, gave him the signal. The massive LED screen behind me flickered to life. The crowd gasped as Ivy's video filled the screen, nighttime hallway footage, the shaky phone camera perspective of an 11-year-old girl hiding in the shadows. The date stamp in the corner, June 15th, 2025. 5 months ago. The office door cracked open, light spilling out. Voices clear in the midnight quiet. Brent's voice from the video. The buyer wires $400,000 next week. That's for the stallion plus breeding rights. Vernon will be at Sunset Ridge before he knows the horse is gone. The crowd went completely still. Bernice's voice on the screen. Dr. Hoffman's assessment gives us medical power of attorney. Once Vernon's in the facility, we can sell everything without his signature. Roxanne's voice hesitant. What if he fights it? What if he... Bernice cutting her off. He's a confused old man. No one will listen to him. My granddaughter's video, her scared, shaking phone camera, capturing her own mother's betrayal, was the weapon that saved us both. On stage, Roxanne had gone white. Brent stood frozen, staring at the screen, like he was watching his life end in real time. Bernice realized what was happening first. She moved fast for a 68-year-old woman, lunging toward the equipment station, where Clayton controlled the playback. "Turn that off!" she shouted, her grandmother warmth evaporating into raw panic. "Turn it off right now! This is private. This is illegally recorded." Sheriff Wade Garrison stepped into her path, his body language shifting from neighbor to law enforcement in one smooth movement. Hand raised for his voice calm but absolute. "Ma'am, I need you to step back," Wade said. "This is evidence in an ongoing investigation. Do not touch that equipment." Bernice stopped like she'd hit a wall. The video kept playing. Brent's voice on screen. "The debt's due, November 22nd. We liquidate the horse, move Vernon to the facility. By the 18th, use the celebration on the 20th as the transition story. Nobody questions it if we control the narrative." Bernice's voice. "The nursing home deposit's already placed, $5,000. Room 17 in the memory care wing. I picked it myself. Locked doors, no visitors without family approval." Someone in the crowd made a small, horrified sound. The video showed the battery icon dropping to 2%. Ivy's finger hovering over the stop button. The timestamp, 11:47 p.m. June 15th. 5 minutes and 38 seconds of conspiracy captured by a terrified child. Then the screen went dark. The silence that followed was absolute. I stood center stage looking at 70 faces I'd known for years. Neighbors who'd come to Helen's funeral, friends who'd brought casseroles and condolences, parents from the therapy program. People who knew me, knew Helen, knew what kind of family we'd tried to build. And I looked at my daughter. Roxanne's face had crumpled not with remorse, but with the realization that she'd been caught. Brent stood beside her, calculating, already thinking about lawyers and defenses. Bernice had backed away from Wade Garrison, but her eyes were on me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear there. Wade Garrison stood between Bernice and the equipment, his body language pure law enforcement authority. The video had stopped, but the damage was done. The crowd wasn't murmuring anymore. They were staring at my daughter, my son-in-law, and the woman who'd called herself family while planning my imprisonment. And every face showed the same thing: disgust. The exposure had only just begun. The crowd was still processing the video, 70 people trying to reconcile the smiling family on stage, with the conspirators captured on screen when Clifford made his move. While the crowd was still processing the video, Clifford Prescott rose from his front row seat, briefcase in hand, and walked toward the stage with the methodical precision of a man who'd spent 40 years destroying liars in court. I stepped aside, giving him the microphone. "My name is Clifford Prescott," he said, his voice clear and professional. "I've been Vernon Whitaker's attorney for 35 years. I'm also the executor of the Helen Whitaker Memorial Trust. What you've just witnessed on that screen is part of an ongoing elder exploitation investigation." He opened his briefcase on the small table beside the podium. "Dr. Gerald Hoffman of Livingston Family Medicine has been suspended by the Montana State Medical Board, pending investigation into falsified cognitive assessments and acceptance of bribes to provide fraudulent diagnoses." Bernice made a small sound, half gasp, half denial. Clifford pulled out a document, held it up, so the front rows could see the official letterhead. "This is the medical board's suspension order, effective November 3rd, 2025. Dr. Hoffman is prohibited from practicing medicine pending the outcome of their investigation into ethical violations." He set down the document and picked up his phone. I'm going to play a 30-second audio clip from Vernon's follow-up appointment with Dr. Hoffman in August. Vernon asked simple questions about the dates of his supposed cognitive assessments. Clifford pressed play. Dr. Hoffman's voice came through the speaker, nervous and fumbling. The assessment was, well, I thought it was November, but the paperwork says December, so I'm not sure which visit we're talking about here. Vernon's voice on the recording, calm. I only came in once, doctor, in December, with Mrs. Caldwell. Dr. Hoffman, yes, right, the December. The records sometimes get entered. Clifford stopped the playback. The assessments were fabricated, he said. Vernon never took those cognitive tests. Dr. Hoffman created false medical records at the request of Bernice Caldwell, who paid him for fraudulent documentation. $3,500 in cash, that's what Bernice thought my freedom was worth, and Clifford had every transaction documented. Mrs. Caldwell's cash payments to Dr. Hoffman, totaling $3,500 over 2 months, are documented through subpoenaed bank records. Clifford continued. 3 payments, $1,500 on October 12th, $1,000 on November 2nd, and $1,000 on November 18th. All cash deposits to Dr. Hoffman's personal account, within 24 hours of meetings with Mrs. Caldwell. Bernice's face went from red to white. Brent grabbed Roxanne's arm, pulling her closer like they could protect each other. The crowd wasn't murmuring anymore. They were staring in horrified silence. Clifford stepped back from the microphone, nodded to me. I took Helen's envelope, the one she'd sealed 8 months before she died, and carefully opened it. Inside were 3 documents. I pulled out the first of the Conservation Trust Agreement. Helen's signature clear at the bottom, dated February 14th, 2024. This ranch doesn't belong to me, I said into the microphone. It belongs to the Helen Whitaker Memorial Conservation Trust, established February 2024, 8 months before my wife died. She knew this day would come. Roxanne's face went slack. The trust contains specific stipulations. I continued reading from Helen's carefully drafted language. The property cannot be sold for commercial development. The champion stallion cannot be sold or exploited for commercial breeding profits. The land must be maintained as agricultural conservation space and may be used for nonprofit educational or therapeutic purposes only. I looked up at the crowd, then at my daughter. And there are forfeiture clauses, I said quietly. Helen wrote these herself. Let me read them exactly as she wrote them. I held the document up to the light, reading Helen's words. Any beneficiary who attempts unauthorized sale of trust assets files false medical claims to seize control of the trust, or seeks to institutionalize the trustee through deception, fraud, or abuse of medical authority, shall immediately and permanently forfeit all inheritance rights, claims, and benefits under this trust. Helen had built a legal fortress so perfect that my family destroyed themselves just by trying to breach it. The silence was absolute. By attempting to sell the stallion's breeding rights, I said, by bribing Dr. Hoffman to create false cognitive assessments, by placing a deposit at Sunset Ridge to force my institutionalization, they triggered every single forfeiture clause. Roxanne's legs buckled. Brent caught her, held her up. No, Roxanne whispered, but the microphone caught it, amplified it across the yard. It can't be. We didn't. Mom wouldn't. She wouldn't cut me out, Roxanne said louder, her voice breaking. She loved me. She wouldn't. I held up the trust document so the crowd could see Helen's signature, the notary seal. The date February 14th, 2024. Valentine's Day. 8 months before the cancer took her. She loved you enough to try to save you from yourself, I said. You just didn't let her. Roxanne stared at me like I'd just pulled the ground out from under her world, which I suppose I had. Her face cycled through emotions too fast to track shock, denial, rage, desperation, and finally, something that looked like the beginning of understanding. Brent was calculating, already thinking about legal challenges, ways to fight the forfeiture. But Clifford had spent 8 months making sure every clause was bulletproof. Bernice stood frozen, her grandmother mask completely shattered, revealing the predator underneath. And 70 witnesses watched it all unfold under the Montana stars. The crowd stood frozen, 70 people processing what they had just witnessed. A family destroyed by their own greed, documented and exposed before their entire community. Wade Garrison moved through the stunned crowd toward Bernice Caldwell, with the slow, deliberate walk of a law enforcement officer who just watched a confession play out on a giant screen in front of 70 witnesses with cameras. Bernice saw him coming, She started backing toward the parking lot, but there was nowhere to go that wasn't filled with neighbors holding phones recording every moment. Wade reached her near the stage exit walkway. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, his voice calm and official, "I need you to remain available for questioning regarding systematic financial exploitation of elderly individuals. We've received formal complaints from 3 additional families regarding your conduct with their parents." The crowd went completely silent. Bernice's face cycled through emotions: shock, denial, calculation, fear. This is harassment," she said, her voice shaking. "I was helping Vernon. I was trying to protect—" "Ma'am, we have documented cash payments to Dr. Hoffman." Wade continued cutting through her protest. "We have nursing home deposits made without the patient's knowledge or consent. And we have a pattern of similar conduct with other elderly clients over the past 5 years. Please don't leave town while this investigation is active." 3 other families Bernice had done this before, and I was just the one who finally caught her. Cell phones throughout the crowd were recording. The charming grandmother who'd brought homemade pie and talked about family values was being publicly connected to systematic elder abuse. Her reputation didn't just crack, it evaporated. "I have rights," Bernice stammered. "I have an attorney." "Then I suggest you call them," Wade said. "And again, do not leave Park County while this matter is under investigation." Bernice looked at me, standing on the stage, and for a moment I saw pure hatred in her eyes. Not regret, not shame, just fury that I'd caught her. Then she turned and walked to her car back straight, trying to salvage some dignity while 70 phones captured her retreat. Brent had disappeared, already slipped away during the trust revelation probably. I'd deal with his debt fraud later. Right now, I was watching my daughter. Roxanne hadn't moved from the stage. She stood frozen, staring at the empty LED screen at the place where her own conspiracy had played for the world to see. The crowd dispersed slowly, neighbors leaving in shocked clusters, everyone on their phones already spreading the story. An hour later, the ranch was nearly empty. Clayton and Kurt were taking down equipment. Clifford had packed his briefcases. Wade was finishing his official documentation. I was walking to my truck when Roxanne found me in the parking lot. She looked wrecked. Mascara-smeared face blotchy from crying, her expensive coat hanging off her shoulders like she'd forgotten how to wear it. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "please, I was scared. I was influenced by Brent and Bernice. I didn't understand what I was doing. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stopped, looked at her. "I'm your daughter," she said, crying openly now. "Please, I made mistakes, but I'm still your daughter. Please don't cut me out completely." I let the silence stretch. Let her stand there in the cold Montana night, waiting. "If you want any relationship with me or your daughter," I said finally, "here are the terms. They're not negotiable." She nodded desperately. "Public written apology to the community," I said. "Posted in the local paper, distributed to everyone who was here tonight. Acknowledging what you did, owning it completely." Roxanne's face went pale, but she nodded. "Legal waiver surrendering all claims to my estate. Signed, notarized, filed with the county. You get nothing when I die except what I choose to leave Ivy." That's 1 year of unpaid work at the Equine Therapy Foundation. I continued. "Every Saturday, you'll work with the children who've lost parents. You'll muck stalls and groom horses and help Kurt with training. You'll see what Helen's legacy actually means." Roxanne was shaking. "And family counseling," I said. "You, me, and Ivy, professional therapist, weekly. For as long as it takes for you to understand what you did to your own child when you made her choose between you and the truth. My daughter couldn't even look at the child who'd saved me while begging for mercy she'd never offered." Roxanne looked across the parking lot. Ivy stood there with Clayton watching. 11 years old, Helen's serious eyes waiting to see if her mother would choose redemption or pride. "Everyone will know," Roxanne whispered. "The apology. Everyone will see it. They'll never let me forget." "That's the point," I said quietly. "You humiliated yourself through your actions. The apology is just acknowledgement. Accountability is the first step toward anything resembling redemption." "And if I can't," she asked, "if I can't do the public apology, and then you walk away," I said. "Keep your pride, lose your family, but you don't get both, Roxanne, not after what you've done." She looked at me, then at Ivy, then back at me. I need time to think," she said. "You have 1 week," I said. "After that, the offer expires, and you're a stranger who tried to steal my ranch." Roxanne stood in the empty parking lot, looking between me and Ivy, her mouth opening and closing without sound. The choice was simple, but brutal public humiliation and a year of unpaid labor for a chance at family, or walk away with nothing but her pride and her debts. She looked at Ivy one more time. Her daughter's face was Helen's face, steady and waiting. And I saw the exact moment Roxanne realized she'd have to decide whether she wanted to be saved. The sound of silence woke me, not the creaking floorboards or phantom footsteps I'd heard for months. Not Helen's voice calling from the kitchen, or Roxanne's accusations echoing through empty rooms. Just silence clean and whole as fresh snow. I opened my eyes to December light, filtering through the bedroom curtains, and for the first time since Helen died, I didn't reach for the empty space beside me with that hollow ache in my chest. The previous night's victory at the Bozeman Gala felt distant now, like something that happened to someone else. Bernice Caldwell's public humiliation, Brent's stammering retreat, the champagne toasts from ranchers who finally believed me. All of it seemed less real than this moment, lying in my own bed, in my own house, on my own land. I dressed slowly, my joints protesting the cold, and made my way to the kitchen. Clayton was already there coffee brewing, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in weeks. "Morning," he said, pouring me a cup. "Kurt's out checking the fence line in the north pasture. Thought you might want to sleep in after last night." "Slept better than I have in a year," I admitted, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. Clayton nodded toward the window. "You should see the pasture. Snowed about 3 inches last night." I carried my coffee to the porch, stepping into air so cold it burned my lungs. The ranch spread before me, blanketed in white that sparkled under the morning sun. And there, in the east pasture, I saw him. The stallion. He stood at the fence line, his dark coat stark against the snow, steam rising from his flanks in the freezing air. As I watched, he tossed his head and bolted, running the length of the pasture, with a power that made my chest tighten. Every stride was freedom. Every breath visible in the cold air was defiance. He ran not because something chased him, but because he could. Because he was still here, still strong, still alive, despite everything Roxanne and Brent had tried to take. I stood there watching him run, and something inside me shifted. Not broke, shifted. Like a bone that had been set wrong for months finally clicking into place. This was why I'd fought. Not for the money or the property lines or even the principle of the thing. For this exact moment. For the right to stand on my own porch and watch a magnificent animal run free across land my father had worked, and my grandfather before him. "Beautiful, isn't he?" Clayton said, joining me on the porch. "Helen used to say the horses knew," I said quietly. "Knew when something was wrong on the ranch. That stallion started acting strange 3 months before she died, like he could sense it coming. You think he knows now that things are settling?" I watched the horse circle back, slowing to a trot, his breath clouding the air. "I think he knows we're still standing. That's enough." We went back inside when the cold got too bitter. Kurt returned an hour later, stamping snow off his boots, reporting that the north fence needed 2 posts replaced, but otherwise everything looked solid. The 3 of us sat around the kitchen table like we used to, before all this started, before Roxanne's accusations, before Bernice's paperwork, before I became the crazy old man everyone whispered about at the feed store. "That's so what now?" Kurt asked, forking up scrambled eggs. "Bernice is done. The gala crowd knows the truth. You thinking about pressing charges?" "Clifford's handling it," I said. "He mentioned something about criminal referrals for the forged medical records." Clayton refilled our coffee cups. "And Roxanne?" I stared into my mug, watching the steam rise. "She made her choice. Chose Brent over family, chose money over truth. I can't fix that." Helen's voice echoed in my memory, something she'd said years ago when I was struggling with a difficult business decision. Sometimes the hardest thing is knowing when to stop fighting, when to just stand still and let the truth catch up. I'd spent months fighting the competency hearing, fighting the conservatorship, fighting to prove I wasn't the broken old man they painted me as. Maybe now was the time to stand still. Let Clifford handle the legal consequences. Let the truth work itself through the system. "Vernon." Clayton's voice pulled me back. Sorry, just thinking about Helen. She always knew when to push and when to wait." Kurt nodded. "She had good instincts." My phone rang, shattering the peaceful moment. Clifford Prescott's name appeared on the screen. "Clifford," I answered. "Everything okay?" His voice was careful, measured in that lawyer way that meant complications. "Vernon, we need to talk about next steps. Last night was a public relations victory, no question. But the legal situation is more complex than I initially thought." Yep, I felt Clayton and Kurt watching me. "What kind of complex?" Bernice Caldwell filed a complaint with the state bar this morning, claiming I orchestrated a public ambush that damaged her professional reputation. It's baseless, but it'll require a response. More concerning, Roxanne's lawyer called. They're claiming harassment, that we intentionally humiliated her in public. They're threatening a civil suit. The peaceful morning cracked like ice under weight. They tried to institutionalize me based on lies, and now they're claiming harassment. I know, but they're angry and desperate people do unpredictable things. There's also the matter of Dr. Hoffman. If we pursue charges against him for the false medical records, his lawyer is already making noise about HIPAA violations and patient privacy claims. I looked out the window at the stallion still visible in the pasture, standing calm now near the water trough. So we won the battle, I said slowly, but the war's not over. That's one way to put it, Clifford said. I need you to come to my office tomorrow. We need to map out our strategy for the next phase. This could get messy before it gets clean. I hung up and set the phone on the table. Clayton raised his eyebrows in question. The lawyer stuff, I said. Apparently winning in public means fighting harder in private. Outside, the stallion tossed his head and started running again, powerful and free against the white Montana snow. He didn't know about lawyers or lawsuits or the complicated aftermath of victory. He just knew how to keep running. Clifford slid the folder across his desk, and I saw Roxanne's signature three times, each one subtly different from the last. 2 days had passed since his warning call about the legal complications. I'd driven to Bozeman that morning, expecting more bad news, more threats from Bernice or Roxanne's lawyers. Instead, Clifford looked grimly satisfied. The signatures don't match Vernon, he said, tapping the documents with his pen. 3 different documents, 3 different versions of Roxanne's hand. Either she's developing tremors or someone else signed her name. I leaned forward studying the papers. Power of attorney, ranch sale contract, breeding rights transfer. The signatures looked similar enough that I'd never have questioned them, but laid side by side the differences became obvious. The R slanted differently. The loop in the X varied. The final P sat higher in one version than the others. Darlene, I said quietly. She had access to everything, lived in that house for months while she played the concerned friend. The forensic accountant agrees, Clifford said. The DA's office is very interested. Wire fraud, forgery, elder exploitation. They're building a case that goes beyond your daughter. The word daughter hit harder than it should have. Roxanne hadn't signed these documents because she hadn't needed to. Darlene Hargrove had done it for her, expanding this conspiracy from family greed into something darker. Criminal fraud, federal charges. Brent's been questioned, Clifford continued. He's cooperating, which tells you how scared he is. Claims he had no idea about the forgeries, that Darlene handled all the paperwork. The investigators are looking at Gretchen Hargrove, too. Darlene's daughter was involved in the financial transfers. I stared at the signatures, these ghosts of my daughter's handwriting. What happens now? The state prosecutes. You're the victim, but it's out of your hands. Wire fraud is federal. Once they're involved, it moves on its own momentum. I thanked Clifford and drove home through December, cold, the mountains sharp against a pale sky. My phone rang halfway back to the ranch. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Whitaker. The voice was shaky, desperate. This is Dr. Philip Ashford. Please don't hang up. Dr. Philip Ashford. 62, thin-faced, the neurologist who'd examined me last spring and declared me mentally incompetent. The man whose signature had nearly cost me everything. Give me one reason not to, I said. My medical license has been suspended. He said, the words tumbling out. Pending ethics investigation. My practice, my reputation. Everything's collapsing. Mr. Whitaker, please, I made a mistake. I pulled onto the shoulder, gripping the phone. You sold your conscience, doctor. You declared a healthy man unfit to rob him of his freedom. I know, his voice cracked. But you need to understand I was pressured. The money, the threats, I wasn't thinking clearly. What money? Silence stretched between us, broken only by his ragged breathing. It was Darlene Hargrove, he finally said. She paid me $15,000. I have the bank records, I'll give you everything. Wire transfers, emails, the whole arrangement. I'll testify. Just please tell the medical board I'm cooperating. $15,000, the price of a man's freedom, paid in cash to a doctor, with a boat payment and a guilty conscience. I sat there on the side of the highway, watching snow blow across the asphalt, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, not even surprise. just the weight of knowing exactly how cheaply I'd been valued. "They'd send everything to Clifford Prescott," I said. "Whether it helps you is between you and the medical board." I hung up before he could beg again. The ranch felt different when I got home, quieter. Clayton and Kurt were out checking cattle, the house empty except for the ticking of Helen's grandmother clock in the hall. I walked to the barn, needing the solid warmth of horses and hay, and things that didn't lie. That's where I found Ivy. My granddaughter sat on a hay bale in the corner stall, 11 years old, with Helen's dark eyes and Roxanne's stubborn chin. She didn't look up when I entered, just kept running her fingers through the straw. "And thought you might be here," I said, settling onto the bale beside her. She shrugged, still not meeting my eyes. "None of this is your fault, Ivy," I said quietly. "You were brave and honest when the adults around you weren't." "I told the truth about what I heard," she whispered. "Now Mom won't talk to me. Dad says she's too upset, that I betrayed the family." The mare in the next stall shifted, her breath steaming in the cold barn air. "You didn't betray anyone," I said firmly. "You told the truth. That's never wrong, even when it's hard. What do you tell an 11-year-old whose world just shattered that adults lie, that family betrays, that love and cruelty can wear the same face? I wanted to give her easy answers, to promise everything would be fine. But Helen had taught me better than that. "I don't understand why Mom wanted to hurt you," Ivy said, her voice breaking. "You never hurt us. You gave us this place, let us visit whenever we wanted. Why wasn't that enough?" "And sometimes people get lost," I said. "They make choices that seem right in the moment, but lead them somewhere dark. Your mother made bad choices, Ivy. That's on her, not you." "Will she go to jail?" I'd been avoiding that question in my own mind. "I don't know. Maybe. The lawyers and courts will decide." Ivy finally looked at me, and I saw the question forming before she spoke it, saw the fear and confusion and desperate hope that somehow this nightmare had an answer that made sense. "Grandpa," she said softly, "is Mom still my mom, after what she did?" The mare shifted in her stall, and I realized some fractures can't be fixed, only witnessed. I reached for Ivy's hand, holding tight to the one piece of family I could still protect, and tried to find words that wouldn't lie, but wouldn't destroy. I looked at Ivy's face, saw Helen's eyes staring back at me, and gave her the only truth I had. "She'll always be your mother," I said quietly. "But being a mother doesn't make someone right. You can love her and still know what she did was wrong." Ivy nodded slowly, and I hoped someday that answer would be enough. Roxanne's car pulled into the drive 3 days before Christmas, and I knew from the way she sat motionless behind the wheel that Brent wasn't coming. I watched from the kitchen window as she finally opened the door, stepped into the December cold, and walked toward the porch with her shoulders hunched against more than just the wind. I met her outside, keeping the door closed behind me. The porch felt like neutral ground, not quite inside, not quite gone. "Dad," she said. Her voice cracked on the single word. I didn't respond, just waited. Let the silence stretch between us like all the months of lies and forged signatures and courtroom testimony. "Can we talk?" she asked. "That's why you're here, isn't it?" She flinched but nodded. We sat in the porch chairs Helen had picked out years ago, watching our breath cloud in the freezing air. Roxanne pulled her coat tighter. "Brent's cooperating with the prosecutor," she said. "His lawyer cut a deal. He's testifying against Darlene and Gretchen in exchange for reduced charges." "I know. He's filing for divorce." I studied my daughter's face, 43 years old, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when Helen was alive. "And you came here to tell me that—" "I came here to tell you the truth," she said. "Not the version my lawyers want me to say, not the story that makes me look better, just the truth." I waited. When Mom died, I was terrified. Roxanne said, her words tumbling out fast, like if she stopped, she'd lose her nerve. "Terrified you'd forget us. Terrified the ranch would swallow everything. Terrified I'd lose you too. You disappeared into this place after the funeral, stopped returning calls, stopped coming to Sunday dinners. It was like you died with her." I was grieving. "I know, but I didn't understand that then. I just saw you pulling away, saw this ranch worth millions, and Brent kept saying we needed to protect our future. Darlene said you weren't thinking clearly, that someone needed to take control before you made bad decisions." The pattern was clear now. Fear twisted into greed, grief weaponized into conspiracy. My daughter hadn't woken up one morning deciding to destroy me. She'd made small compromises, believed small lies, until the path behind her was gone, and the only direction was forward into darkness. "When did you know?" I asked. "When did you know it was wrong?" Roxanne's face crumpled. "When Ivy looked at me in the courtroom. when I saw how she saw me. Not as her mother, as someone she didn't recognize. Some daughters inherit their mother's eyes. Mine inherited her fear and never learned the difference between holding on and strangling. Fear doesn't justify betrayal, Roxanne, I said quietly. Your mother taught you better than that. I know. Tears streaked her face, now freezing in the cold. I know, and I can't take it back. Can't undo the competency hearing or the forged papers or any of it. Clifford says the DA is offering a plea deal if I testify against Darlene. Will you take it? I don't know. It means admitting everything publicly. It means Ivy will read it in the papers, will know exactly what I did. She already knows, I said. She testified, remember? Roxanne closed her eyes. Can you ever forgive me, Dad? The question hung in the frozen air between us. Could I forgive the daughter who'd tried to institutionalize me, steal my land, erase everything Helen and I built? Could I separate the terrified woman on my porch from the conspirator who'd signed legal papers and hired corrupt doctors? I don't know, I said honestly. Ask me again in a year, after the courts are done, after you've faced what you did without lawyers softening it. She nodded, standing slowly. Ivy wants to come for Christmas, if that's okay. Ivy's always welcome here. And me, I looked at my daughter Helen's daughter and saw both the woman who'd betrayed me and the child who'd once helped me feed horses on winter mornings. Not yet, I said, but maybe someday. Roxanne left without another word, her car disappearing down the long drive into the gray afternoon. I went to my study, closing the door against the cold and the confusion and the weight of family fractures that couldn't be easily mended. Helen's letter sat in the desk drawer where I'd kept it for months, reading it whenever the anger got too heavy. I unfolded it now, her handwriting still sharp and clear. Boundaries aren't walls. Vernon, they're the only way love survives. Protect what we built, but leave the door open for those willing to walk through it honestly. I know you'll want to forgive everyone immediately to fix things by sheer force of will. But some lessons only stick when consequences teach them. Love Roxanne. Protect Ivy. But don't sacrifice everything we worked for because you're afraid of being the bad guy. You're not. You're just the man who has to draw the line. How do you forgive someone who tried to bury you while you were still breathing? Helen's answer, I realized, wasn't about forgiveness at all. It was about boundaries, about protecting what mattered while leaving space for redemption that might never come. The foundation document sat beside her letter. The Helen Whitaker Conservation Foundation, Clifford had titled it. Ironclad forfeiture clauses ensuring the ranch could never be sold or subdivided. Trust provisions protecting the land for conservation and education. Legal structures that meant no daughter, no creditor, no future greed could threaten what we'd built. You were right, Helen, I said to the empty room. About all of it. Outside, snow began to fall heavy and silent, blanketing Montana in white. I folded Helen's letter and placed it beside the foundation documents, her name in bold across the top. The snow fell heavier now, coating the pastures and the barn and the fence lines where my father had once worked and his father before him. Somewhere in Bozeman, Roxanne faced the consequences of her choices. Somewhere in my barn, Ivy would find safety on Christmas morning. And here in this study, I sealed the future not with forgiveness or revenge, but with the careful architecture of protection. The Conservation Trust would ensure neither greed nor fear could threaten this land again. The foundation documents were filed on the last working day before New Year. Clifford had called that morning, his voice carrying a satisfaction I hadn't heard in months, telling me to come to the Park County legal office for the final session. Wade Garrison closed the file and looked across the conference table with the tired satisfaction of a man who'd seen justice done. The sheriff had led the investigation from the beginning, documenting every forged signature, every false medical claim, every dollar that had moved through corrupt hands. Mr. Whitaker, he said, sliding a stack of papers toward me. The investigation is closed. Your ranch, your autonomy, your assets all restored and protected. I stared at the papers without touching them. Restoration and protection words that should have felt like victory, but instead felt like the end of a long war nobody won. Clifford sat beside me, adding details I barely heard. Restitution agreements, restraining orders, prosecution recommendations for Bernice Caldwell's elder abuse conspiracy, the legal machinery grinding forward whether I wanted it to or not. What about Brent? I asked. Wade exchanged a glance with Clifford. He's cooperating fully. His testimony against Darlene Hargrove and her daughter, was key to closing the financial fraud case. The door opened and Brent Townsend walked in, 45 years old and looking older, his expensive suit hanging wrong on shoulders that had lost their confidence. My son-in-law, former son-in-law, the man who'd married my daughter and helped plot to take everything. He sat across from me, couldn't meet my eyes. "I never wanted it to go this far," Brent said quietly. I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air, inadequate and true at the same time. He'd been manipulated by Bernice Caldwell, and Darlene's schemes caught in a conspiracy that spiraled beyond his control. But he'd still signed papers, still participated, still chosen greed over integrity. "The restraining order stands," Wade said. 500 yards from Mr. Whitaker's property. Violation means arrest." Brent nodded, defeated. He stood to leave, paused at the door. "Roll out Ivy, I love her," he said to me. "Tell her yourself," I replied, through the court-approved channels. He left and the door closed on that chapter of my life. Clifford gathered the papers into his briefcase. "Now you can live out your promise, Vernon. Not just protect the land, transform it." I drove back to the ranch through brilliant Montana sunshine, the kind of clear winter day where the snow sparkles like diamonds and the mountains stand sharp against blue sky. The kind of day Helen used to say made everything worth it. Clayton and Kurt had spent the week preparing the arena. The wooden sign they'd carved sat at the entrance, Helen's name in oak that would weather but never fade, Helen Whitaker Memorial Foundation, equine therapy for young survivors. The first visitor arrived that afternoon, a girl about 9 years old brought by her grandmother. Cancer had taken her mother in the fall. The grief sat on her small shoulders like a weight too heavy to carry. Ivy met them at the gate, 11 years old, and already learning how to transform her own pain into purpose. She led the girl to the gentlest mare, showing her how to brush the coat, how to read the horse's breathing, how to find peace in the rhythm of care. "Grandpa," Ivy called to me, her face bright with something I hadn't seen in months, joy mixed with meaning. "Can I help teach the kids about the horses?" "That's exactly what this place is for," I said. Clayton stood beside me, watching Ivy work with the young girl. Helen would have loved this boss, turning pain into purpose. He was right. Helen had turned our grief into this herd after her diagnosis, using the horses as therapy for herself and anyone else who needed them. Now I'd turn this herd into healing for others carrying the same weight. Children who'd lost parents, adults who'd lost spouses, anyone who needed to learn that grief doesn't have to be carried alone. Movement at the property edge caught my eye. Roxanne stood there outside the fence line, far enough to comply with the legal boundaries, but close enough to see. Watching Ivy. Watching the foundation that bore her mother's name. Not entering, not leaving, just standing in the space between exile and redemption. I walked to the fence. "That's the doors there, Roxanne," I said across the distance. "When you're ready to walk through it honestly." She nodded but didn't move closer. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But the door was there, and that was enough. The day faded into evening, the visitors leaving Ivy heading inside, with Clayton and Kurt for dinner. I stood alone in the pasture as the sun dropped behind the mountains, painting the snow orange and pink. In the east pasture, the stallion moved at an easy canter, head high, breath clouding the cold air. 18 months ago, Brent had tried to sell him to Dubai. Tonight he ran free on land that would never be touched. Helen's letter was folded in my coat pocket, carried there like a talisman since the day she died. I pulled it out now, reading her words one more time in the fading light. "Protect what we built, but leave the door open for those willing to walk through it honestly. You fight to save something, and in saving it, you discover what it was always meant to become. This ranch wasn't just land or legacy or assets to protect. It was Helen's final gift, a place where broken things could heal, where children who'd lost too much could find solid ground, where horses ran free inside boundaries that protected rather than imprisoned." The stallion circled back, tossing his head, his hoofbeats steady on the frozen ground. I watched him run until the light was nearly gone, until the stars began appearing over Montana mountains that had stood here long before me and would stand long after. I kept our peace, my love. I said to the empty air, to Helen, to the wind that carried my words into the night. The stallion's hoofbeats faded into silence. I folded Helen's letter one last time and looked back at the foundation sign, her name carved in oak, permanent as the mountains. The ranch she'd loved, the herd she'd built, the legacy she'd trusted me to protect, all transformed into something greater than property or pride. The Montana snow began falling again, soft and endless, covering everything in white. I stood there in the silence, 69 years old, and finally at peace watching the land we'd fought for become the healing we'd always needed. And to you listening to my story, remember this. The land you protect matters less than the principles you stand on. Looking back, I made mistakes. I should have seen the warning signs earlier, Roxanne's fear after Helen died, the desperate way she clung to control. Maybe if I'd listened better, talked more openly about grief and the future, things wouldn't have spiraled so far. But I learned that protecting what you love sometimes means drawing hard lines, even when it breaks your heart. This family story taught me that boundaries aren't walls. They're the framework that lets love survive. When someone tries to take what's yours through lies and manipulation, standing firm isn't cruelty. It's respect. Respect for the truth, for the people who came before you, for the legacy you're meant to protect. I believe God put me through this trial to show me the difference between enabling and loving, between keeping peace and keeping integrity. Every family story has its battles. The question is whether you'll fight for what's right or surrender to what's easy. If this family story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about standing firm when everything's at stake, please subscribe to Revenge Dad. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. I appreciate you being here with me. One final note, while the heart of this story is true, some details have been adjusted for privacy and storytelling. What matters is the lesson we can all take from it.